second. Yeah. Same order as stuff I sent this morning. Bart announces when he goes.
I am. Good morning, everyone. The committee will come to order. Pursuant to notice, the Committee on Science and Technology meets to consider the following measures. H.R. 906, the Global Change Research and Data Management Act of 2007. H.R. 1933, the Department of Energy Carbon Capture and Storage Research, Development, and Demonstration Act of 2007. The H.R. 2773, the Biofuels Research and Development and Enhancement Act, and H.R. 2774, the Solar Energy Research and Advancement Act of 2007. I know that we have a lot of other markups going on today, so we're going to try to proceed, but I'd like to make a couple of announcements at first. I know some of the members have been interested in the trip we're going to be taking, the fact-finding trip we're taking to Greenland the weekend of July the 19th. We should know today about, we have a plane, but we still have some concern about in-country travel because we can't use our plane there because of the length of the runway. We should know more about that today, so we'll know the size and the number of folks that we can take. Also, you have received a letter to you, but through your office, but I'll remind you in case you didn't know that there's going to be a climate change meeting of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. The parent body that oversees Kyoto Protocol will be held in Bali from December the 3rd to the 14th. There'll be important areas of discussion will include carbon sequestration, reforestation, avoiding deforestation, and carbon trading. There'll be about 10,000 international delegates there. We will not, or as members, we will not be a credentialed participant, but we will be able to interact with those folks that are there. We will not be taking a science committee group as a whole, but we do have some slots I think will be made available to us for individuals that would like to go. But again, it is when you put 10,000 people there, it's going to be crowded, and so you need to let us know soon. And finally, I think that we should all say happy birthday to Margaret today. We congratulate on her on surviving one more, and hope there'll be more to come.
And happy anniversary to you and your wife, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah. By the way, from 7 to 9, it would be a good time to call votes because I'm not going to be here tonight. With concern about global climate change, the high gas and electricity prices, and our growing reliance on unstable energy supplying nations, energy has come to the forefront of our constituents' awareness and has been placed at the top of the congressional to-do list. Here on the Science and Technology Committee, we have responded with an aggressive energy agenda. With the addition of 4 bills that we're going to mark up today, this committee will contribute an even dozen pieces of bipartisan legislation that made a vital contribution to the national strategy to put U.S. and the world on track to a more sustainable future. First, we will consider H.R. 906. Mr. Udall and Mr. Inglis, the ranking member of the Energy and Environmental Subcommittee and co-sponsor of the bill, have worked together to produce this legislation. H.R. 906 reorients the U.S. Global Change Research Program to produce more policy-relevant climate information for regions, state, and local governments and other groups. We will then take up H.R. 1933 by Representative Udall, which sets out the next steps in DOE's carbon mitigation strategies. In addition to ongoing research in carbon management, the bill authorizes DOE to conduct demonstrations on large-scale carbon capture and storage technologies through partnerships with industrial, academic, and government entities. Because we will continue to use our abundant resources of coal to meet our energy needs for the foreseeable future, it is critical that we demonstrate an integrated system of capture, transportation, and storage of carbon dioxide at a scale that encourages industry to start making technological choices. Next, the committee will take up a bill by the chairman of the Energy and Environmental Subcommittee, Representative Nick Lampson, H.R. 2773, the Biofuels Research and Development Enhancement Act, will better coordinate and compile information from federal biofuels research programs and focus biofuels research on infrastructure needs and efficiency of biorefinery technologies. H.R. 2773 also provides for the in-depth study of several challenges facing broader use of biofuels and increases the funding levels of biofuels research. Finally, we will consider H.R. 2774, the Solar Energy Research and Advancement Act of 2007, introduced by the Congresswoman Giffords. This bill creates an R&D program on energy storage technology for concentrating solar power plants, which allows for the use of solar energy even when the sun isn't shining. It also asks DOE to conduct studies on how to best integrate concentrating solar plants within the grid and the ways to reduce water usage in these plants. In addition, it creates a workforce training program for solar installation and maintenance, which is critical to making solar power a real energy option across the nation. For each of these bills, the Energy and Environmental Subcommittee held legislative hearings, had markups where we heard valuable witness testimony, and facilitated good member discussions on the barriers and possible pathways to these programs. And as you know, we are not alone in this effort. The Energy and Commerce Committee is marking up a series of bills today at this very moment, and my friend Congressman Hall, as well as a few of the folks in the majority, are on both committees. So we are monitoring that, and if you see a dust cloud here at some point, we'll be moving to the other committee to make those votes, but I'm sure we'll be left in good hands here, and we'll continue with this markup. In conclusion, I want to urge my colleagues to support these bills. I know that the committee's pace has been very aggressive, and it has been difficult at times for all of us. However, I believe the products that have resulted from this process demonstrate the value of this committee, and its bipartisan work reflects the entire membership. The bottom line is that we're going to have an energy bill in July. The Science Committee is going to, on a bipartisan way, make a major contribution with that. There are going to be several other committees that will have bills. We're going to get a reference from most of those, sequential, which we will also put our mark on. Every bill that's come out of this committee has been bipartisan, all but one. We'll see what happens today, but so far all but one has been unanimous, and so I think everyone on this committee can go home and claim a great deal of credit for what I think will be not an enormously comprehensive, but a good bill, a step forward that will pass by a large margin on the House floor in July. And so now I recognize Mr. Hall to present his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll try not to take the full length of time and make one statement. I'll be glad, as I'm sure you will and others, when this month passes. I understand that you and your fellow chairman and other members have been working, I guess, under the usual pressure of this first year to get and report bills out of the committee. And sometimes I fear that when we rush things through, we don't get the best end products we could have if we had more time to fully vet the language, but I guess we'll be working that as we go. You've done a good job of working with us, and I thank you for that. While I think improvements in the bill before us today are going to occur through amendments to be offered, I think they could be improved further, and I hope we'll have other opportunities to do this as the bill moves to the floor. It's also my hope and understanding that going forward there will be more of an effort to have both sides working together as we craft legislation to come before this committee. We'll have more time. I think this would improve not only the quality of work we produce, but also the bipartisan way in which they're handled. With that said, I support and believe it's important to our country's energy future to keep all options on the table, and we strive to do that with the three energy bills before us. One of our greatest challenges as a nation is energy self-sufficiency. We need to break our dependence on foreign sources of energy from countries we don't trust and who don't trust us. To do that, we need to be honest and practical about what needs to be done to get to that point. Solar and biofuels are an important source of domestic energy, but they're also limited in their scope. It's important that we continue to research and develop resources we know exist domestically and currently provide reliable, affordable, and clean sources of energy. I look forward to working with the committee and working with you, Mr. Chairman, in the months ahead to address this reality so that Americans can enjoy more energy choices at a lower cost. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Hall. Let me also say that you may not know, but I met privately and personally with the Republican, both the staff from the members as well as the committee staff the other day to talk about how we can, do what I think is a good job even better. There were compliments in some areas of the consultation. There were suggestions for improvement in the others. I've asked for them to put together models of how they see things done in good ways that we've done it, and if we haven't done it as well as we'd like. So those kind of models, we're going to continue to work together. I'm a new chairman. There's a lot of new staff, and we are going to get this thing better and better as we go along, because I truly believe that the more consultation gets us a bipartisan bill, a consensus bill, and we're all going to be better off. So does anyone wish else to be recognized? All right, then I ask unanimous consent that the bill is considered as read and open to amendment at any point, and that the members proceed with the amendments in the order on the roster without objection. So ordered. The first amendment on the roster is a manager's amendment offered by the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Udall. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I am. If I might, could I make a statement on the bill itself?
And you have an amendment at the desk?
Mr. Chairman, I have a bill at the desk, and if I might, I'd like to make a statement on the bill
itself. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 906, offered by Mr. Udall of Colorado.
Okay. Excuse me, Mr. Udall. I guess my gavel got in front of your request to make a statement. Let me recognize once again you for a statement, and anyone else that would like to.
Thank you, Chairman Gordon, for bringing the bill up today. And if I could, I'd like to just briefly describe it. I introduced H.R. 906, the Global Change Research and Data Management Act of 2007, with my colleague from South Carolina, Mr. Inglis, earlier this year. Climate change is occurring. Its impacts are already being felt across the country, from Alaska's melting tundra to more intense droughts across the West. Although we are still debating how to address this challenge at the federal level, we will have to confront climate change soon, and with some mix of mitigation and adaptation. The increase in extreme weather events alone will have a very large human and economic cost. H.R. 906 will set us in the right direction by expanding and improving the U.S. Global Change Research Program, provide more user-driven research and information. We will need economic and technical information, as well as information about system responses and climate responses to different concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, to design cost-effective policies to achieve reductions and avoid dangerous impacts of future climate change. The program should be the vehicle providing this information. H.R. 906 will improve the outreach and information exchange aspects of this program and make the information that it provides more useful. This program has contributed significantly to our knowledge about climate change and our planet's environment since its formation in 1990. But we now need to expand this information and tailor it to the needs of decision makers confronted with management and mitigation challenges. I should add that I believe that we must cut our carbon dioxide emissions as a part of our response to climate change. However, H.R. 906 deals with a research program. The legislation does not create a cap-and-trade program or any other regulations. And Mr. Chairman, before closing, I'd truly like to thank the staff on both sides of the aisle for their hard work on this legislation. We are lucky to have such an excellent staff on the Science and Technology Committee. And again, I want to thank my colleague, Representative Inglis, for working with me on H.R. 906, and I would ask our colleagues to support this important legislation. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Udall. I recognize Mr. Hall to present any opening remarks.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be very brief. Mr. Udall laid it out very well. This bill reorients the U.S. Interagency Climate Change Science Program to make it a little more responsive to the needs of state and local resource managers. And I'm also pleased that the committee held a hearing on the bill and took the time to consult with both sides of the aisle on it. And I think with that, I yield back my time.
Does anyone else wish to be heard? Mr. Ellers is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment, and this is not intended to be negative about the bill, but I think we have to realize that carbon sequestration has very serious limits. First of all, it's virtually impossible to use it to apply to the transportation sector, which is probably the largest single sector generating carbon dioxide. Secondly, I suspect serious efforts at carbon sequestration are going to be so expensive, it's certainly going to make nuclear energy look much more palatable to most people for producing electricity. And that immediately removes a major source of carbon dioxide. So I don't want to throw a cloud over this issue, particularly a CO2 cloud, but I think we have to keep in mind the broad picture that this is going to be a very difficult issue. And although this bill is a good thing to do, don't expect it to solve very many problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ellers. Your always comments add to our discussion here. Does anyone else wish to be recognized? If not, I ask unanimous consent that the bill is considered as read and open to amendment at any point, and that the members proceed with the amendments in the order on the roster. Without objection, so ordered. The first amendment on the roster is a manager's amendment offered by the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Udall. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I am, and I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 906 offered by Mr. Udall of Colorado, amendment number 067.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The manager's amendment incorporates a series of additional changes to the legislation. Again, I want to thank my good friend Representative Inglis for working with me to develop and incorporate these changes. There are a few minor changes to refine several provisions in the bill. And in addition to those changes, there are 3 more significant changes or additions to the bill. I'd like to briefly touch on those 3 changes. First, we've added a requirement for the Interagency Committee to subdivide the U.S. into regions that are likely to experience similar impacts or share similar vulnerabilities to global change. We made this addition to facilitate the implementation of a requirement for regional workshops with outside stakeholders contained in the amendment that will be offered in a few minutes. It's also necessary to define these regions if we are to develop more refined projections of climate change impacts and design adaptation and mitigation strategies tailored to regional conditions. We also refined the language requiring the program to assess the vulnerabilities to climate change for all regions of the world. The IPCC process provides a good basis for that. We are directing the program to utilize that information to analyze the implications for the United States. Changes in other parts of the world will impact us indirectly, and we need to understand what those indirect impacts are likely to be. We also consulted with the administration. They had some concerns that the language we adopted in the subcommittee did not achieve our goal of ensuring maximum use of the information produced by the Global Change Research Program that is incorporated into the IPCC reports. We've incorporated language that the administration provided to accommodate their concerns and ensure that the information used to produce the reports and other assessments is fully utilized and incorporated into the assessments required under this Act. And finally, we amended Section 303 of the original bill and moved it into Title I. Section 303 was part of the original 1990 law. It required the administration to establish an information office to facilitate the distribution of the program's information domestically and internationally. The program does maintain a website, so we decided to modernize Section 303 to reflect the new reality of electronic communication. The new Section 112 requires the establishment or designation of a Global Change Research Information Exchange that will make information from the program and other sources available through electronic means. Again, I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Inglis, for working with me on this amendment and the legislation, and I'd urge adoption of the amendment.
Is there further discussion of the amendment? If no, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The second amendment on the roster is offered also by the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Udall. Are you ready to proceed with
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 906 offered by Mr. Udall of Colorado, amendment number 066.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the most consistent comments we've received during the hearing and throughout the written comments was the need for a strong advocate in the administration with corresponding budget authority. After the hearing, I should say at the hearing on H.R. 906, we heard testimony from multiple witnesses explaining the need for a lead agency of the U.S. Global Climate Research Program. Dr. Mahoney, former director of the Climate Change Science Program, stated that to be successful, a program like this must have a reasonably funded management and coordination office with a sense of permanence to it. During questioning Dr. Jack Fellows, Vice President at the University Center for Atmospheric Research, explained, "I do think there is an argument to be made for the U.S. Global Change Research Program to be close enough to political power to make the kind of decisions and trade-offs that you would across an agency, and to have some level of budget authority that can help to encourage or provide incentives for people to make investments in the highest priority areas of the program. I've worked with my colleague and co-sponsor, Mr. English, to craft a solution to this long-standing problem in the U.S. Global Change Research Program. The amendment may not go as far as some would advocate, but we believe it does address the shortcoming of the program our witnesses and others identified. The amendment designates the Office of Science and Technology Policy as the lead agency of the U.S. Global Climate Change Program and a single point of contact responsible for the program, the Director of OSTP. OSTP has a long history of involvement with the U.S. GCRP, and its designation as a lead agency is consistent with its purposes as defined in the National Science and Technology Policy, Organization, and Priorities Act of 1976. That was the law that created OSTP. The amendment also authorizes OSTP to perform interagency tasks. The Director of OSTP, in consultation with the Interagency Committee for the program, is required to identify activities included in the strategic plan that involve the participation of 2 or more agencies and that are required by the Act. The identified activities are those that do not have budget allocations within the individual agencies. The Director then has the authority to allocate funding to get these tasks done. The funds could be used for activities such as development of scenarios needed to make projections of climate change and its impacts, calibrating and testing alternative models, identification and definition of economic sectors and regional climatic zones, and convening regional workshops to facilitate outreach with regional, state, and local governments and other non-federal stakeholders. We have heard from many of the outside groups about the value of regular forums for exchange of information. The amendment requires the Director to ensure that at least one workshop will be held in each region annually to facilitate the exchange of information between the program and other organizations and individuals with an interest in climate change. The amendment authorizes $10 million per year for these activities. And again, I want to thank Mr. Inglis for working with me on this amendment, and I urge my colleagues to support this amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Udall. Mr. English, you're here just in time if you'd like to make a comment on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to be a co-sponsor of Mr. Udall's bill, the Global Climate Change Research and Data Management Act. For many years, the United States Global Research Program has coordinated a successful interagency research program on global environmental change and implications of a changing climate for society. H.R. 906 continues support for this research and makes the research user-friendly for federal, state, and local decision-makers who are tasked with the job of creating policies that address the challenges associated with climate change. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Inglis, for your help on this amendment and the bill in general. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? If no, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The third amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Georgia. Dr. Gingrey, are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
I am, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 906 offered by Mr. Gingrey of Georgia, amendment number 307.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. During the hearings, of course, we heard from a number of expert witnesses, and the question always in my mind, in the mind of many other members of the committee, and I think on both sides of the aisle, is not so much a question of the science in regard to climate change, but the action that we take as decision makers in regard to adaptation and or mitigation. And in this bill, which I think H.R. 906, and I commend Mr. Udall and Mr. Inglis for bringing it forward, an excellent piece of legislation. But Section 108 calls for the administration to report to on a timely basis to the Congress an initial report, I think, within 1 year after passage of the bill, and then every 3 years thereafter. My amendment basically would assign this responsibility, would have the administration, whatever administration that might be, to contract with the National Academy of Public Administration and the National Academy of Sciences for them to submit those reports so that we get information that in no way, shape, or form would be biased in regard to not just what we should do and recommend to our global partners, but also our state and local communities in regard to what policies are being used in the way of adaptation and mitigation, how are they working, and what is the cost benefit analysis of that as we get down to making these tough decisions. So I understand, Mr. Chairman, that the amendment has been favorably looked upon by Mr. Udall and by you, Mr. Chairman, and I am pleased with that. So I would again offer that amendment to the committee and ask for its approval.
Thank you, Dr. Gingrey. It's a good amendment. Clearly, we should not be making recommendations that we don't know the full impact of the cost. And I think this amendment will help us be able to obtain that information. Does anyone else wish?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to strike the last word.
A gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Just briefly, I want to thank Mr. Gingrey for offering this important amendment. And my friend from Georgia asked a great question at the third IPCC hearing. Now that we know that climate change is happening, what do we do about it? What is the best way to reduce the impacts of climate change while also preserving the American way of life? We must find solutions that reduce emissions but also protect jobs. And my friend from Georgia, clearly your amendment will help us figure out which strategies make the most sense moving forward, and I think it improves the legislation. Thank you for being engaged, and I'm proud to support your amendment.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? If no, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The fourth amendment on the roster is offered by the gentlelady from California, Ms. Woosley.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 906 offered by Ms. Woolsey of California.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Mr. Chairman, my amendment is a commission, it commissions a study to examine how climate change is causing the melting of the ice sheet and how that melting will affect sea level rise. On February 2nd, 2007, Mr. Chairman, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, released its report detailing the current state of scientific knowledge on climate change. A week later, this committee held a hearing to investigate this report and the findings of the IPCC Working Group 1. And at that hearing, we learned that Working Group 1 had greatly underestimated their projections of sea level rise because the data that was available to them at the time did not include some of the greatest threats to sea level rise, the ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, many scientists now argue that on the current warming trend, we really could completely melt the Greenland ice shelf, adding 7 meters to sea level, while the eventual disintegration of the West Antarctic ice sheet remains controversial. So this melting, if it happened, would add another 7 meters to the sea level. These are frightening statistics. We have to know more about them, and that's why my amendment directs the National Science Foundation to enter into an arrangement with NOAA and NAS to complete a study. And we then can be more accurate in what we're determining our needs will be. And the IPP report, when it includes Greenland and Antarctica, could make the difference between whether we're looking at 2 feet or 40 feet predicted based on global warming.
I thank the gentlelady. This is a good minute, particularly with someone who represents a coastal constituency.
Right.
I understand your concern. Is there further discussion on the amendment? If no, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The fifth amendment on the roster is offered by the gentlelady from Texas. Ms. Johnson, are you ready to proceed with your amendment? The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 906 offered by Ms. Eddie Bernice Johnson of Texas.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment will add critical information that scientists will need to better understand the formation, track, and intensity of hurricanes, as well as the implications and potential impact due to climate change. As we know, this nation, especially the Gulf Coast, has suffered immense damage due to past hurricanes. This year's hurricane season is predicted to be intense as well. Our nation requires comprehensive and improved hurricane research on frequency and intensity and on the relationship between climate change and hurricane development. We need to adequately utilize the expertise of our nation's scientists through our national academies. Investing in this research study enables us to better plan, mitigate these disastrous impacts. My amendment directs NOAA Administrator and National Science Foundation Director to work with the National Academy of Sciences to complete a study of the current data on the impacts of climate change on hurricane formation, its track and frequency. The study should take into consideration the information gained by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, as well as additional information that has amassed since the fall of 2005. Our country remains extremely vulnerable to severe damage and loss of life from natural disasters. And since 2001, hurricane damage has cost our nation an average of $35.1 billion in economic loss per year. In the past 2 years, hurricanes have resulted in over 1,450 innocent lives lost. The study will provide information on scientific findings relating to rapid storm intensity change, relationships among storm size, motion, and intensity, the internal dynamics of hurricanes, and the manner in which they interact with the environment. Mr. Chairman, detrimental climate change will only increase the need for a report of this nature. It is imperative for Congress to have access to status reports on scientific findings and to shape responsible policies relative to climate change. And thank you for allowing me to offer this amendment, and I urge my colleagues to accept it, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Is there further discussion on the amendment? If no, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Are there other amendments? If no, the vote is on the bill. H.R. 906 as amended. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. I recognize Mr. Hall for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee favorably report H.R. 906 as amended to the House with the recommendation that the bill as amended do pass. Furthermore, I move that the staff be instructed to prepare the legislative report and make necessary technical and conforming changes, and that the chairman take all necessary steps to bring the bill before the House for consideration. I yield back.
The question is on the motion to report the bill favorably. Those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is reported favorably. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The members will have 2 subsequent calendar days in which to submit supplemental, minority, or additional views on the measure. ending Monday, July the 2nd at 9 a.m. I move pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 22 of the Rules of the House of Representatives that the committee authorize the chairman to offer such motions as may be necessary in the House to adopt and pass H.R. 906, Global Change Research Data Management Act of 2007, as amended, without objection, so ordered. We will now consider H.R. 1933, the Department of Energy Carbon Capture and Storage Research, Development, and Demonstration Act of 2007. I yield to the gentleman from, before I yield, I just want to say thank you to Jean Frucci for her staff work on this. It was given as an illustration to us as the best practices in terms of collaboration, and so thank you for that work. We will now consider H.R. 1933, the Department of Energy Carbon Capture and Storage Research, Development, and Demonstration Act of 2007. I yield to the gentleman from Colorado 5 minutes to describe his bill.
Thank you, Chairman Gordon, for bringing this bill up for markup today. Coal has been an important source for energy in our country since the Industrial Revolution. Today, coal generates more than 50% of our electric power, and as the country with the largest coal reserves in the world, the U.S. will continue to use this plentiful energy source for years to come. Unfortunately, coal-burning plants are also a major source of greenhouse gas emissions and other pollutants. As we confront concerns over climate change, one of the greatest challenges we face is how to lower our carbon dioxide emissions while maintaining our strong economy and the American way of life. Carbon capture and storage technology will be critical to addressing that challenge, but we need to work together to fully advance these CCS technologies. And that's why I introduced H.R. 1933, the Department of Energy Carbon Capture and Storage Research, Development, and Demonstration Act of 2007. The legislation will expand and improve the Department of Energy's Carbon Capture and Storage Research and Demonstration Program. It will authorize 2 separate demonstration programs with up to 5 demonstrations for carbon capture and up to 7 demonstrations for large-scale carbon dioxide injection and storage. The storage demonstrations will require a range of geologic settings to ensure that we are exploring a variety of options and will include research and development of monitoring and verification systems to determine whether CO2 is leaking back into the atmosphere or our drinking water supply. The bill recognizes that demonstrating an integrated CCS system is critical to developing a commercial application system to sequester large amounts of carbon dioxide. But the bill also recognizes that R&D efforts on each can and should proceed independently until the technology is ready to be integrated. The language in this bill is based in large part upon the recommendations included in an interdisciplinary study by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, named The Future of Coal, which was released earlier this year. In working to improve the bill, my staff and the committee staff worked with many stakeholders, including representatives from the coal industry and the environmental community. We must begin to address the climate change challenge, but we must not cause irreparable harm to our economy and our coal industry in the process. Creating safe, sound, and economical capture and storage strategies is the key, and H.R. 1933 will help get us there. I would ask my colleagues to support this important legislation, and it's now my pleasure to yield to Chairman Gordon my remaining time.
Thank you, Mr. Udall. Let me thank you for really the good work you have put into this legislation. Coal is our most abundant domestic fossil fuel, and without it, literally the lights will go out over most of the country. Electric utilities across our nation and throughout the world use coal and will continue to use coal. Therefore, it is essential that we develop carbon capture techniques that will safely sequester carbon production as a byproduct of coal combustion. And I know there are a number of members on both sides of the aisles who have strong interest in conversion of coal to liquids as one solution to reducing our dependency on foreign sources. And let me say that following up on Mr. Eller's comments earlier, this is an expensive venture. And following up on Mr. Hall's comments of earlier of not doing something before it's ready, I have real concern that we are not ready. This issue is not ripe in terms of the coal to liquid. We've had some informal, both member meetings as well as staff meetings, headed really by Jerry Costello, who has a strong interest in this issue, to learn more about it. We're going to have additional hearings in the fall on the coal to liquid issue. I really don't think that this is appropriate now, and I think that if we try to insert an area or an amendment at this time, it will only cause problems for a good bill on sequestration. And as a practical matter, I think it's going to be difficult to have a successful coal to liquid program without a good sequestration aspect to it. I think we could do it today. Coal to liquid is not ripe, and for that reason, I would hope that we would not pass any amendment that would cause a problem for this one. And with that, again, I will now ask if anyone else. Dr. Ehlers is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier this morning, as you mentioned, I gave a magnificent statement about the difficulty of carbon sequestration. Unfortunately, I had not yet emerged from my morning stupor and did not realize that the majority had cleverly switched the order on the agenda. So I ask unanimous consent that my earlier statement be entered in the discussion of this bill rather than the discussion of the previous bill, which we took up.
Certainly, and Dr. Ehlers, I think everyone knew what the intent of your comments and your good comments and where they were directed. So certainly for the unanimous consent is accepted.
Well, if they noticed that, they probably emerged from their stupor before I did. Thank you very much.
Would you like to continue, reiterate that statement now that we're here on the bill? And there might be new people here.
No, if we can just to put my statement at the appropriate place in the record. I was just pointing out that carbon sequestration is going to be extremely difficult and especially very difficult to make it economically feasible. And it also avoids the major source of carbon, which is the transportation sector. But for the details, you can go back to my earlier statement. Thank you.
Without objection, Mr. Hall is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I thank Mr. Udall for introducing the bill. If we're going to continue to use coal, which is our most abundant and affordable domestic resource, our companies that keep this country powered and running are going to need the technology to enable them to capture carbon dioxide and then sequester it. I'd just like to take this opportunity to applaud DOE and the Future Gen Alliance in their continued work on this front. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Costello is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, let me associate myself with the comments made by Ranking Member Hall concerning the Future Gen Alliance and the Future Gen program. As you know, both on this committee and other committees in the House, I have strongly supported the Future Gen project. I think it is a worthwhile project, and I was pleased to see the administration, their initiative on Future Gen, as well as their commitment on funding for the Future Gen project. Let me also associate myself with your remarks concerning both sequestration and coal to liquids. I think everyone is aware that the leadership in the House has made it clear that coal to liquid technology will not be a part of the energy package that will be presented and considered in the House in July. I am disappointed, frankly, that we are not acting on coal to liquids now. However, I have been meeting with both Chairman Dingell and the subcommittee Chairman Boucher concerning our commitment to coal to liquids, and we believe that we have a commitment both from the leadership and from various committee chairs in the House to move forward with a coal to liquid initiative later in the year. And I am pleased, Chairman, that you have also made a commitment to work with us on the coal to liquids technology in the future. So I will associate myself with your remarks and just say that we all know there is no substitute for coal for the next 25 years or so. I have talked about the difference in cost of using coal versus using natural gas and oil, and what we need to do is to continue to look ahead to determine how we can enhance the use of coal in a responsible, environmentally friendly way.
So I thank you for your commitment to work with us both on carbon sequestration and coal to liquids in the future, and we will defer this fight on coal to liquids to another date in the fall.
Hopefully it won't be a fight. It will be a consensus that we can bring together through more hearings, more information. Mr. Akins is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just not to raise a big squalling fit here or anything, but my sense is that we would be wise, particularly when we're looking at research that we don't know how much things are going to be costing or how the numbers work out, not to try to choose favorites. I think that that's been a strength of this committee, that we have not chosen favorites. So we say, hey, there's a place for nukes, there's a place for coal, there's a place for solar energy, a place for conservation. I think that that's a strength because that allows the economy to work and to choose their own favorites, maybe depending on the region or depending on different technologies as they develop over time. I'm a little concerned, Mr. Chairman, that what you're doing with this legislation is you are picking favorites. You're saying we like the sequestration, but we don't like liquefaction. Both of those technologies are pretty far out. Both of them appear to be very expensive, but it seems to me we'd do better to proceed on a broad front rather than to try to pick favorites. I do appreciate the fact that you're willing to look at the liquefaction later in the year, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aiken. Well, actually, we're following your advice. This bill does not pick favorites. That's why we're not getting into coal to liquids. You'll find that sequestration is the foundation of any type of new coal technology. And so this is a favorite neutral bill. It is developing right now only the base types of research technology that's necessary for any kind of coal use. At a later date, when we start getting more information, then we can get more specific if we think so. But right now, this is not picking winners or losers. Does anyone to
Mr. Chairman, do
yes.
you yield? Because
Yes.
just from an engineering point of view, I'm not quite getting what you're saying. If you're taking the coal and you're going to take the CO2, you get energy from combining the the coal with oxygen, then you're going to pump that under the ground. Now, that isn't the same technology as taking coal, liquefying it, and then burning it somewhere, because then you'd have to pump the CO2 that comes out of whatever burned it into the ground. So I don't understand. It doesn't seem to me that sequestration is a step before liquefaction. That doesn't make sense to me.
Not a step before, but a step that goes with. You're not going to see, I don't think, any type of coal to liquid process that doesn't have a parallel sequestration element to it.
Are you saying we're going to have every car that burns some type of liquid is going to capture the CO2 that's coming out of the tailpipe and pump that into the ground?
No, the process of going coal to liquid will have a sequestration element to that.
I'm not sure about the science of that, but thank you anyway. Sure.
Walker was, I think, the next to have his hand up, followed by Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you very much, and I certainly believe that we should be doing what we can to ensure that our coal reserves are part of America's energy future. And however, what we're doing today goes in exactly the opposite and wrong direction. This is aimed, and this is one of the reasons those of us who are so adamant in our opposition to this theory that humankind is causing the climate to change. This is a perfect example of the harm that's being done by the perpetuation of that false theory. We are fixating ourselves on CO2. When we look at coal, and we should be looking at coal, we should be looking at the byproducts that are harmful to human beings. Whether it's methane or whether it's the particulates or whatever comes out of using coal that hurts human beings, that's what we should be focusing on. Instead, what we're doing, as we are today, is we're focusing on a way to eliminate the coal emission of CO2. CO2, which is the basis of course, this theory that we have too much CO2 and it's changing the climate. So we fixate on that, and we leave the health of human beings behind. And what we, just to point out what I consider to be the absurdity of it all, is CO2 has never been identified by any source, by any recognizable scientific source, as a threat to the health of human beings, ever. CO2, in fact, is plant food. The more CO2 that's in the air, it's good for plants. It actually causes the plants to grow more robustly. Over the world's history, there have been time periods when there is more CO2 in the air. And the CO2 that is in the air, let us note this, that if you imagine a football field, the amount of CO2 in the air is the equivalent of 6 inches on the football field. The amount of human contribution to that 6 inches of the football field is about 1/2 of an inch. Now, this minuscule amount that's going on in terms of CO2, with no discernible impact on the health of human beings, is not what we should be looking at. We want to use coal. We want to make sure we're energy independent. But by spending money focusing on sequestering CO2 is exactly the wrong direction to go. Let me note also that there are ample scientists from MIT and from major universities throughout the world who suggest that human beings, yes, we're producing CO2, but the CO2 is produced overwhelmingly by nature, and that the warming that's taken place in the last 150 years, which many of us believe is a natural trend caused by the solar activity, as is going on in Mars and all the other planets, that CO2 that is being produced is not, of course, a product of global warming. It's being produced by other things, but that more CO2 happens after warming rather than creating the warming. And there are a number of major scientists who have pointed this out and have not been refuted by the scientific community. So this particular legislation, which of course is we're being told will help us utilize our coal, which I think we should, is exactly going in the wrong direction, and this should be defeated. It's a waste of money, and it's harmful to the health of human beings, while focusing on an idea that we're changing the climate of the planet with CO2, which is, of course, refuted by very, very prominent scientific authorities. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bard is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm an enthusiastic supporter of this bill, but I would like to inject a word of caution that we not be overly enthusiastic about the contribution that coal will make to our energy future. It is true, we have 250 years of coal at current use rates. If you increase the rate of use only 2%, which doubles, by the way, in 35 years, 4 times bigger in 70 years, 8 times bigger in 105 years, then that 250 years of coal at only 2% increase in use rate shrinks to 85 years. If we now do what Mr. Costello would like to do, and what we will be doing in the future, and convert that to a liquid or to a gas, we will need energy to do that. If you take that energy from the coal to do that, now you've reduced it to 50 years. And if we share this with the world, and today it's inevitable, there's no way not to share energy with the world because it moves on a world market, then it shrinks to 12.5 years. So our 250 years of coal at current use rates, if you increase its use only 2%, convert it to a gas or a liquid, and share it as we must with the world, that shrinks to 12.5 years. I'm a very enthusiastic supporter of this bill, but I didn't want us to have the illusion that if we are able to sequester CO2 and therefore can use coal widely, that will be the solution to our energy future. It will make a valuable contribution, but a limited contribution. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a manager's amendment pending, but I would say to the gentleman from California, my good friend Mr. Rohrabacher, that we will continue to disagree on the utility and the breach of climate change theory. But when we capture carbon, as I understand it, we capture many of the other harmful elements that are present in coal as a solid, whether it be mercury, SOx, NO2, and other elements that are harmful to human health. So there is a collateral benefit when we capture carbon and then sequester what we've captured. So I think in that sense, what we're attempting to do makes good sense when it comes to human health. I'd be happy to yield to the gentleman.
You yield for a question, or would the gentleman?
Happy to yield.
To the degree that what you just stated would be the focus, is to the degree that I could be supportive of what we're trying to do here. To the degree that we are looking at things that will be harmful to people's health. You know, children are going to be breathing this air their whole life. The things that we're putting in the air right now, if the things that you just stated were the target, I would be much more supportive. I would be very supportive of what we're trying to do. It seems to me that, however, we're just playing into a popular item of the day with CO2, and we do that at the expense of people's health. But however, if we can do both, I'm happy to hear that.
Reclaiming my time, I'm certainly a proponent of the no regrets approach to climate change, which is we ought to do all we can now to deal with what we think, and again, I think you and I have a fundamental difference of opinion here, what is a changing climate, and the process we generate collateral benefits. One of the interesting ones that I've heard recently, and I look certainly to your right and further to your right, not politically speaking, but on the dais, Mr. Bartlett and Mr. Ehlers, that there are new liquid fuel technologies that, in effect, capture carbon, and then that carbon can be used it's a solid carbon, it's char, can be used to fertilize and to be a part of the agricultural cycle. So that we also, as you know, are very indebted to petroleum products for fertilizer and for production of food in this country. So there are some very interesting technologies that I think will emerge from.
Tell me over just one moment.
I'd be happy to.
And that is, so we're going to be eating it rather than breathing it. And it again indicates that it's not harmful to your health. And I would suggest that coal sequestration is extremely expensive compared to trying to focus on these other alternatives, which I say, if you're an environmentalist, we want to watch out for the environment so people will live better. I agree with those type of environmentalists. And
reclaiming my time, it has been suggested, Mr. Rohrbacher, that human beings are temporary carbon sinks. So perhaps that's a reason to eat additional carbon. I don't know. You may have to further study that particular situation. But, Mr. Chairman, we could probably continue this discussion, but I think it would be useful to yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Udall. I recognize that Mr. Rohrbacher is the father of triplets and certainly is concerned about their health as we are about all of our children's health. The good news is that this is one of 4 bills we're having today. We are not just focused solely on this issue. We're going to be talking about biofuels and solars and other types of areas that will be good for for those triplets that we all want to see grow up well. So if there is no other discussion, I ask unanimous consent that the bill is considered as read and open to amendment at any point, and that the members proceed with the amendments in the order of the roster. Without objection, so ordered. First amendment on the roster is a manager's amendment, offered by the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Udall. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I do have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 1933, offered by Mr. Udall of Colorado.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading, and without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll do my best to be brief here. There are a number of technical changes that are included in the manager's amendment. I didn't want to go through those, but I wanted to give a brief description of the substantive change to the carbon dioxide capture demonstration program, and I wanted also to clarify the funding levels for the programs in the bill, although I would point out that we have not changed the funding levels. The amendment, manager's amendment, adds a provision to the carbon dioxide capture demonstration section of the bill to authorize the Secretary of Energy to take actions needed to further integrate the carbon dioxide capture demonstrations with the DOE's large-scale CO2 sequestration program. Now, this provision comes from discussions with industry and environmental interests and is intended to encourage the use of CO2 captured in the demonstrations to supply the large volumes of CO2 required under the sequestration demonstration program. And I would further add that this provision builds on the MIT's report, The Future of Coal, that recommends that the U.S. should establish programs that provide operational experience with an integrated system of capture, transportation, and storage. H.R. 1933 moves us toward that goal. And then in addition, because we received some questions about the funding levels for basic R&D in the bill, my amendment breaks out the funding categories, and let me just outline those. The basic R&D and field testing would be authorized at $100 million for each of fiscal years 2008 through 2011. The carbon sequestration demonstration program is funded at $140 million for each of the fiscal years 2008 to 2011. And the carbon dioxide capture demonstration program is funded at $180 million for each of the fiscal years from 2009 to 2012. Again, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for moving this important legislation forward and for co-sponsoring H.R. 1933. Obviously, I think the amendment, manager's amendment, approves the bill, and I'd urge my colleagues to support it.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? If no, the motion is on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The second amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Matheson. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
I am ready, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 1933 offered by Mr. Matheson of Utah.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will be a brief explanation. This amendment's more of a clarification to make sure we consider eligibility for different opportunities for geologic formations for sequestration. The main candidate, I believe, for sequestration is going to be depleted oil and gas fields, and there are some unique geologic characteristics to those that are located in high-altitude areas. Since I come from the Rocky Mountains, which is a long-standing oil and gas producing region of the country, I thought it was important that we just include an amendment to this legislation that just expands the eligibility for a high-altitude oil and gas field to be considered for the testing program. This isn't a mandate, but it just includes that eligibility, and I just thought it'd be helpful to clarify that in the legislation. And that's it, Mr. Chairman. If there's anyone who wants to discuss it, otherwise I'll just yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Matheson. You know, this is another example of why work by committee is better than work by a few. Mr. Hall just thinks that you get oil and gas from the plains, and didn't think about how altitude, and so you bring a whole new dimension to this, and you make this bill a better bill. Does anyone else wish to be recognized? If there's no further discussion on the amendment, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The third amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Ross. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 1933 offered by Mr. Ross of Arkansas.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for bringing the committee together today to consider this important legislation that provides federal support for the Department of Energy's research and development programs for carbon capture and storage technology. I think we all know that we have about a 250-year supply of coal in America. There's a lot of debate over whether we will ever be able to fully utilize that in an environmentally friendly manner. I'm not here to debate the aspects of that today. I will say this, that the Fayetteville Shale, which is a natural gas find in Arkansas that's going to surpass the Barnett Shale in Texas in size. No one knew it existed 50 years ago. 20 years ago, we couldn't recover it in an environmentally friendly manner. 10 years ago, it was too costly to recover. And now, a lot of folks in Arkansas that grew up with very little are making a lot of money as a result of that Fayetteville Shale. My hope is that over the next years we'll be able to do the same thing with coal, finding a way, not utilizing 1940 or 1950 technology, but utilizing 21st century technology to be able to utilize it in an environmentally friendly manner, which helps make our nation more energy independent. My amendment simply does this. It works to help our nation achieve this goal by establishing a research and development grant program for universities and colleges to research carbon capture and sequestration in conjunction with enhanced oil and mineral recovery. The amendment authorizes $10 million for the Secretary of Energy to award 5 grants competitively for projects submitted by universities to research carbon capture and storage in combination with enhanced oil recovery. This study will help us determine whether by injecting and storing CO2 underground, can we do that and recover significant quantities of domestic oil, all while addressing global warming. This amendment will provide universities the tools to research and develop ways to see if, in fact, this can work and can lead to an environmentally friendly way to utilize the 250-year supply of coal we have in this country. The amendment also designates that at least 2 of the grants should go to rural or agricultural-based institutions that offer programs in the environmental sciences to promote diversity among the projects and ensure that any environmental impacts of this technology are thoroughly examined. Additionally, the reason for this, most coal mines that we know about are not in urban areas, they're in rural areas. As our nation looks for new sources of energy, I don't believe that we can forget about those that we currently possess. This amendment will simply allow research and development to occur in colleges and universities to be awarded by the Department of Energy in a competitive manner to hopefully find ways to use coal in an environmentally friendly manner in making America more energy independent. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that explains my amendment.
Mr. Ross, does Mr. Hall or anyone else from the Texas delegation wish to respond to the slur of Mr. Ross on the size of Texas?
When gentlemen yield. Mr. Ross and I share Texarkana, and while he has a lot of Arkansasians who are on the Texas side, I have a lot of Texans who are on the Arkansas side, and I hope Mr. Ross doesn't forget that. My mother was born in Cave City, and I have a good many people that vote in your district. Up to now, they've all voted for you, Mr. Ross.
Well, let's just say that Arkansas and Texas both share a large portfolio there. Is there further discussion on the amendment? If no, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The 4th amendment on the roster is offered by the gentlelady from Texas. Ms. Johnson, are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm ready to proceed. My amendment is at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 1933 offered by Ms. Eddie Bernice Johnson of Texas.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fossil fuel powered electric plants are one of the largest sources of carbon dioxide emissions in the United States, responsible for roughly 40% of our country's overall greenhouse gas emissions. In order to continue using our large supplies of coal and other fossil fuels to power our economy in a carbon-constrained world, we must learn to capture the CO2 emissions from fossil fuel-powered electric plants. For this reason, my amendment would revise the bill to place special emphasis on demonstration projects to capture CO2 from these plants as opposed to other facilities. I know these plants oh so well. We got plenty of them up in the area. The amendment focuses on a new demonstration grant program to develop technologies to capture carbon dioxide emissions from electric power plants. It would require at least 2 of the projects that demonstrate capture technology to take place at the fossil fuel-powered electric facilities. This amendment would ensure that our attention is concentrated on the area of greatest opportunity so that we can leverage the lessons learned to have the greatest possible positive impact throughout our nation's power production system. I'd like to thank the subcommittee chair, Mr. Udall, for his collaboration in devising this amendment and urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Any other discussion? Mr. Bilbrey is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I speak in support of the amendment, and let me just say that I think we look at the history of emission reductions in the last 40, 50 years in this country, and there's been so much talk about mobile sources, automobile emissions, but where the great breakthroughs have happened, the most cost-effective reduction in emissions across this country have been on stationary sources. And stationary sources are the low-lying fruit. It's where we should aim for first. It's where we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. And I would strongly support that we focus on the electric generation facilities, because that is where we are going to find the best and easiest place to make the big improvements, and not be diverted away over on a lot of these mobile sources that look sexy, but are not going to have the impact and the reductions available that we're going to see in a very short time for stationary sources. So I would support the gentlelady's amendment and yield back.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? If no, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The fifth amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
Aye, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 1933 offered by Mr. McCall of Texas.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I applaud your efforts on carbon capture and sequestration on this bill. As Lamar Smith and I know, the University of Texas has been very engaged in this area in research and development. I think it's a very promising area. My amendment clarifies by adding coal to liquid facilities to the list of facilities that are eligible for large-scale carbon sequestration demonstrations provided for in this bill. Although there are currently no coal-to-liquid facilities operating in the United States currently, the Department of Energy has informed us that there are at least 16 of these plants being planned by companies, local governments, and Indian tribes. When these facilities become operational, they will naturally become sources of carbon dioxide emissions. And it seems to me if they're going to be emitting carbon dioxide, we ought to be capturing that as well. Adding carbon capture and sequestration technology could cut these carbon emissions from these facilities by almost in half, which would put them in line with the emissions from petroleum-based diesel. The bill before us right now is intended to study the challenges and develop technology related to safe, large-scale sequestration of CO2. With these new CTL facilities already being planned, it makes good sense to me to add these new sources of large-scale CO2 emissions to the list of sources that qualify for the study under this bill. And as the chairman pointed out, this bill should apply to any type of coal use, and I think that would also apply on coal to liquid. This is good for human health, as one of the other members stated earlier. As I look at the definition in the bill, it talks about facilities. It says consideration must be given to the capture of carbon dioxide from industrial facilities. It seems to me that a coal-to-liquid facility already falls under this definition in the reading of this bill, and the bill does go further to delineate specific facilities it should apply to, such as electric energy from fossil fuels, refining petroleum, manufacturing iron and steel, manufacturing cement and commodity chemicals, ethanol, and fertilizer plants. So it seems to me that this simply clarifies the bill and makes clear that the coal-to-liquid facilities, which are going to be built and which will be emitting carbon dioxide, will be able to capture that carbon dioxide and protect human health and further this program. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. Let me say to Mr. McCall, I know this is a very thoughtful amendment, and as I had mentioned earlier, though, we have started the process of trying to educate ourselves more on the coal-to-liquid issue. I simply think we are not there yet to develop what I would call a consensus and a really thoughtful position here. We're going to have additional hearings, gather more information in the fall. hopefully we then can, again, bring that consensus around. And I think that your amendment is premature at this time, and would hope that, again, the information that we learn from this sequestration will be something that will be what you might call technique neutral in terms of whatever the use of coal might be in the future.
Mr. Chairman, go ahead.
Well, I guess we should go to Mr. Hall first.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I think this could help the chairman and others on that side with their education. Maybe just call this a little summer course, getting a head start. I think it's a good amendment, and briefly, we're going to support it over here. We wish you would accept it, but if you can't accept it, then we'll accept the challenge of change.
Mr. Udall is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Hall, I think perhaps we're going to have to forego summer school, but maybe we can pick this up when first semester starts in the fall, is what I heard the chairman suggesting. I just want to associate myself with the chairman's remarks. CTL remains experimental technology, but as we've, I think, made the case, and MIT in particular made the case, the need for carbon sequestration technology is much more urgent. And the chairman underscored that we'll address CTL, and I wanted to commend my good friend from Texas, Mr. McCall, for his interest in this area, and I know we will take the time to better understand how we could apply these technologies at some other time. But in the context of this piece of legislation, I'd urge my colleagues to oppose the amendment, somewhat reluctantly, but nonetheless, I would ask you to oppose it.
Chairman?
Ms. Matheson.
Move to strike. Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say that I do think this is an important issue, and I do look forward to this committee taking on a robust effort, as you've discussed, in terms of really studying this issue, because I do think there's interest on both sides of the aisle to see if we can make this technology work. I share a lot of the interest that Mr. McCall has in submitting this amendment, and so I just appreciate your statement that you want to take this on in a robust way and have this committee really dive into this issue, and I think there's interest on both sides of the aisle to really dive in.
If the gentleman would yield, this committee has not been shy this year in trying to be aggressive in a lot of areas. Mr. Costello came to me earlier this year and said that he would like for the Science Committee to take the lead with resources, take the lead in letting Resources, Energy and Commerce to join us in terms of a variety of hearings. We started the process earlier. I believe we are the only committee that's had any kind of hearings, formal or informal, on this issue. And I'm not sure where it's going, but I want the Science Committee to be on top of it, and we will take that lead this fall. Does anyone else wish to be recognized? If not, the vote is on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Nay. In the opinion of the chair, the nays have it.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a recorded vote.
The clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Gordon.
No.
Chairman Gordon votes no. Mr. Costello. No. Mr. Costello votes no. Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson votes no. Ms. Woolsey. Ms. Woolsey votes no. Mr. Udall. Mr. Udall votes no. Mr. Wu. No. Mr. Wu votes no. Mr. Baird. Mr. Miller. No. Mr. Miller votes no. Mr. Lipinski. No. Mr. Lipinski votes no. Mr. Lampson. No. Mr. Lampson votes no. Ms. Giffords. Ms. Giffords votes no. Mr. McNerney. No. Mr. McNerney votes no. Mr. Kanjorski. Ms. Hooley. Ms. Hooley votes no. Mr. Rothman. No. Mr. Rothman votes no. Mr. Honda. No. Mr. Honda votes no. Mr. Matheson. No. Mr. Matheson votes no. Mr. Ross. Mr. Ross votes no. Mr. Chandler? Mr. Chandler votes no. Mr. Carnahan? Mr. Carnahan votes no. Mr. Malassa? Mr. Malassa votes no. Mr. Hill?
We need another lesson here. Go ahead, Charlie. You have to one more time.
Mr. Malassa?
Almost. we all have.
I'm getting close. Okay. Mr. Hill? Okay. Mr. Melanson? Thank you. Mr. Hill? Mr. Mitchell? Mr. Wilson? Mr. Hall? Mr. Hall votes aye. Mr. Sensenbrenner? Mr. Lamar Smith? Mr. Lamar Smith votes aye. Mr. Rohrbacher? Mr. Rohrbacher votes aye. Mr. Bartlett? Mr. Bartlett votes aye. Mr. Ehlers? Mr. Ehlers votes aye. Mr. Lucas? Mr. Lucas votes aye. Ms. Biggert? Mrs. Biggert votes aye. Mr. Aiken? Mr. Bonner? Mr. Finney? Mr. Finney votes aye. Mr. Nagelbauer? Mr. Nagelbauer votes aye. Mr. Inglis? Mr. Inglis votes aye. Mr. Reichert? Mr. Reichert votes no. Mr. McCall? Mr. McCall votes aye. Mr. Diaz-Bolart? Mr. Diaz-Bolart votes aye. Mr. Gingrey? Mr. Gingrey votes aye. Mr. Bilbray? Mr. Bilbray votes aye. Mr. Adrian Smith? Mr. Adrian Smith votes aye.
Has Mr. Mitchell been recorded?
Mr. Mitchell is not recorded. Mr. Mitchell votes no.
Is there anyone else? Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Wilson is not recorded.
I think Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wilson, ask him again.
Mr. Wilson? Mr. Wilson votes no.
Is there...
Ask Mr. Melanson again.
Is there anyone else? We want to be sure everybody has a chance to get recognized on this. If not, the clerk will report the vote.
Mr. Chairman, 22 vote no, 15 members vote aye.
Are there other amendments? If no, then the vote is on the bill. H.R. 1933 as amended. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Ms. Johnson is now recognized to offer a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we report this bill to the full House with the recommendation that it pass. I move that the committee favorably report H.R. 1933 as amended to the House with the recommendation that the bill do pass. And further, I move that the staff be instructed to prepare the legislative report and make necessary technical and conforming changes, and that the chairman take all necessary steps to bring the bill before the House for consideration.
The question is on the motion to report the bill favorably. Those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Members have 2 subsequent calendar days in which to submit supplemental, minority, or additional views on the measure, ending Monday, July the 2nd at 9 a.m. I move pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 22 of the Rules of the House of Representatives that the committee authorize the chairman to offer such motions as may be necessary in the House to adopt and pass H.R. 1933, the Department of Energy Carbon Capture and Storage Research, Development, and Demonstration Act of 2007, as amended. Without objection, so ordered. We will now consider H.R. 2773, the Biofuels Research, Development, Enhancement Act. I yield the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Lamson, 5 minutes to describe his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I noted at our recent hearing and during subcommittee consideration, I believe that we must enhance our efforts to develop a diverse set of alternative energy sources. And biofuels represents one of our best opportunities to accomplish this. My bill, H.R. 2773, the Biofuels Research and Development Enhancements Act, represents another effort toward reducing our country's dependence on foreign sources of oil, and building a domestic industry for clean, renewable fuels. The bill has several key components. The bill creates 2 focused research efforts within the existing bioenergy research program created in the Energy Policy Act of 2005. First, recognizing the inherent problems with transporting and storing biofuels in the existing petroleum fuels infrastructure, the bill establishes a program of research, development, and demonstration for modifications and treatments to existing infrastructure and research and development of new infrastructure system for biofuels. Recognizing the technical barriers to increasing the production of biofuels, the bill also establishes a program of research, development, demonstration, and commercial application of technologies to increase the energy efficiency and reduce the energy consumption of biorefinery facilities. The bill will help to better coordinate and compile the rapidly expanding base of information from biofuels research programs by setting up a DOE center to serve as a clearinghouse of information related to the research, development, and commercial applications of technologies related to biofuels and biorefinery technologies. The bill will provide research grants in states with low rates of biofuels production to work toward the development of biofuels assets. And the bill will expand the Bioresearch Center program created in the Energy Policy Act of 2005, allowing for the establishment of additional regionally dispersed centers. The bill also directs the Secretary to conduct several studies. These findings of these studies will help to guide the committee's efforts as we look to make additional federal research commitments in the future. And last, the bill makes additional commitments to ongoing biofuels research programs by increasing the authorization levels for these programs. This increase will also accommodate the new focused infrastructure and efficiency research efforts that I mentioned earlier. And during subcommittee consideration, the committee adopted 2 amendments. The first was a manager's amendment that made several technical changes as well as minor substantive changes worked out between the majority and the minority staff. The second amendment, offered by Ms. Woolsey and Mr. Bartlett, added to the bill a focus on the environmental impacts of biofuels development. Both amendments improved the bill, and I'm pleased the issues were brought before the subcommittee. This bill will help to enhance the ongoing federal efforts to support biofuels research and development, as well as provide necessary information back to Congress that will allow us to make additional research commitments in the future. I urge the members of this committee to support the bill, and I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
I recognize Mr. Hall to present any remarks on the bill.
Again, I'd like to state my support for this bill, in as much as it's looking into the important questions we need to answer in order for our country to start shifting our dependence from foreign sources of oil. I thank the chairman and Chairman Lamson for agreeing to accept my amendment on biogas, a renewable fuel that's generated from landfills and agricultural waste, sewage treatment plants, cellulose, and other biomass sources. Yeah. I'll speak further on my amendments to this bill as they're brought up. With that, I yield back my time.
Does anyone else wish to be recognized? Mr. Bilbrey is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I don't mean be, let's just say the ants at the picnic or whatever you want to call it. I know there's some more colorful terms, but I just ask that as we go through with the biofuel issue, that we recognize that not all biofuels are created equally from the environmental point of view. Biodiesel itself has a great environmental benefit and has a great BTU capability. It's very efficient. But I just feel obligated to say again and again and again that when it comes to virgin fuel ethanol, the emperor has no clothes. That ethanol is not an environmentally friendly fuel. California has been requesting for over a decade the elimination of the mandate for air pollution reasons of ethanol. And I'd just like to say that if we're talking about ethanol being the finished product or the major product in this bill, then the bill was misguided. If we are talking about the development of technologies to where the biofuels are fuels that do not have the vapor emissions problems of ethanol, has a longer carbon chain than alcohol, then I can say we are headed in the right direction. But I cannot allow this time or any time to go by from now on to where everybody sits back and just assumes that because it is quote-unquote renewable, that ethanol is a clean fuel for the future and that we should be betting our technology on the use of alcohol as an alternative to gasoline. And I just ask that we have a frank and open discussion of the fact that ethanol is a use that is going to be curtailed in the future, and that one of the things you're going to hear again and again is people standing up and saying ethanol is not the environmental answer to our either the greenhouse gas problem or to our energy crisis.
Would the gentleman yield?
I yield to the gentleman.
I share your interest in your concerns. It seems that we've tried to make ethanol more or less about a silver bullet. But we tried to craft this legislation to be very balanced, that would include all biomass and make sure that all of them be given a fair hearing through research as to what can be given back to us in the way of our energy benefits. So I would be happy to do anything that I can to work along with you to make sure that that's the real benefit of this.
I appreciate that, and reclaim my time. I just hope you understand that as a member of the Air Resources Board, we were begging the federal government to stop mandating that we had to use this fuel. And I think all of us agree that the California Air Resources Board is a leader in clean air. That the scientists were telling us we need to get this stuff out of our gasoline, to where EPA, recognizing the science, has reduced our mandate down to 5%. And in reality, during summer use, if the California environmental community had its way, we would outlaw all ethanol use during the summer. And I just want to say that again, and I'm going to continue to say that. Ethanol is not the environmental silver bullet that everybody is trying to sell it, and they're making a lot of money off of it. But the emperor has no clothes, that this is not an environmental option for the future. We need to get away from the concept of alcohol and go to more environmentally friendly green fuels. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bilbrey. Just to give a footnote to this, I don't want to go too long. To President Bush's credit and the Department of Energy, they have been pushing forward also on biofuels. Yesterday at 1 o'clock, the Secretary announced 3 consortiums across the country that will be looking into a diverse use of biofuels, developing enzymes that can break them down. It was really, and it's a 5-year program. They're going to give $25 million per consortium each year for the next 5 years. It's a very exciting program, and it will have in a diverse area of biomass, as well as the ultimate use for it. So I think that, and they were excited about what we're doing here today, which I think adds on to that bill. Does anyone else wish to be recognized? If not, then do you want to? Should we? You want to go forward with the colloquy now?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, Mr. Inglis is recognized for a colloquy.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to strike the last word for purposes of entering into a colloquy with the gentlelady from California, Ms. Woolsey, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Bartlett. In the subcommittee markup on H.R. 2773, we talked at some length about language in Section 12, line 15, which amended the goals of the systems biology program set up under Section 977 of the Energy Policy Act of 2005, which says it's, quote, facilitate the production of fuels in sustainable production systems that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, including hydrogen. It goes, quote, I'm concerned that this provision could limit helpful research that might carry emissions at the outset, but which might lead to better technologies in the future. As an example, and I'd ask this of Ms. Woolsey, as an example, would coal to hydrogen technologies that generate carbon emissions not be eligible for funding under this program?
I appreciate the gentleman's concerns, and as I said in the subcommittee markup, and Council has clarified, the intent of these goals is not to restrict helpful research or to prejudice the ultimate outcome of the research in terms of its sustainability and greenhouse gas emissions. Our amendment adds a goal, the goal of achieving sustainable production of fuels and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. At the outset of the research, the fuel or system for producing may not have achieved this ultimate goal, but certainly we think that it should be the direction of the work. Actually, if the fuel in question, hydrogen or any other fuel, has already achieved the goals of sustainable production and reduced greenhouse gas emissions, then its development is probably past the point where much additional research is needed. I would argue that all these fuels need research and development support to achieve these important goals. If we ultimately discover they can't get there, then we should abandon them. But we can't know unless from the very start we point out what the fallacies could be. However, I do not intend that the Secretary of Energy, when deciding on what fuel production programs to promote, places emphasis on the sustainability of those fuels. Already, we're seeing negative impacts on corn prices due to the ethanol boom. As my colleague, Mr. Bartlett, who co-sponsored the amendment with me in subcommittee, pointed out, using corn for fuel is not sustainable, at least not the way we are producing it now. And we ought to steer research and development toward fuel development that will yield abundant and renewable results.
I thank the gentlelady, and I'm happy to yield to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to address the gentleman's concerns. It was never my intent, and I do not believe the language in the Woolsey-Bartlett amendment will restrict research and development of technologies that will ultimately provide payoffs both for our climate and our energy market. The language I offered along with the gentlelady from California, Ms. Woolsey, was simply a mission statement that we will be supporting programs that aim at having an end result of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and start with the goal of sustainable energy development. I want to reiterate that Council clarified during our subcommittee markup that expressing the intent of these goals in our amendment would not restrict helpful research. Take the coal to hydrogen example you mentioned. There is an end result in mind, a clean, emission-free product. In addition, we are working on carbon capture and sequestration projects in other areas that would complement a coal-to-hydrogen program and offer solutions on how to cut back on the carbon emissions. So, no, I don't think your example would be prohibited. Again, I thank the gentleman for his concerns.
I thank the gentlelady from California and the gentleman from Maryland for their comments. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I assume everybody's happy, so if no one else wishes to be recognized, then I ask unanimous consent that the bill is considered as read and open to amendment at the point that members proceed with amendments in the order of the roster. Without objection, so ordered. The first amendment on the roster is a manager's amendment offered by myself. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 2773 offered by Mr. Gordon of Tennessee.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. I recognize myself for 5 minutes to explain the amendment. I have an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment. No, excuse me. The my manager's amendment makes 3 minor changes to the bill, all suggested by the minority. It adds consultation with EPA in the Infrastructure Research Program. It adds consultation with the Department of Transportation in the study of optimizing flex fuel vehicles to use E85, and it adds the national labs to the list of eligible consortium participants in the grant programs for states with low rates of biofuel production. Again, all 3 of these changes are based upon suggestions of the minority, with a specific thanks to Ms. Biggert for raising the oversight or raising the oversight of the inclusion of the national labs. And I appreciate the consultation with my colleagues, and I urge adoption of the amendment. Is there further discussion? Ms. Biggert is recognized.
Thank you. I move to strike the last word.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to express my thanks to you for recognizing the important contributions that our national labs can play in the biofuels research and agreeing to allow them to participate in consortia competing for the grants in Section 6. It's quite clear that the scientists and engineers at the labs who have expertise in this area. And just yesterday, Oak Ridge National Laboratory in the chairman's home state was selected by the DOE to lead one of the 3 bioenergy research centers. Congratulations. And I don't think we should preclude these distinguished researchers from participating in possible future bioenergy research efforts, which is why I urge my colleagues to support the chairman's amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady is absolutely correct. All 3 of the awards yesterday had significant participation for the labs. There would have been an oversight not to have done that, and we thank you for reading the bill and bringing it to our attention. Is there further discussion on the amendment? If no, then the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The second amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hall. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
I'm ready. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 2773, offered by Mr. Hall of Texas.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
And this is the number is 008. Correct?
Yes, amendment number 008.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you. And my amendment directs the Secretary to carry out a program of research, development, and demonstration as it relates to the blending of transportation fuels derived from coal to liquids with biofuels. As we continue to work toward energy independence, and I realize that we all want that. You don't have to be a Republican or a Democrat to want to be independent of those people over there that we rely on for 60% of our energy. 40% from Saudi Arabia, a country that we don't trust and we don't really like nor look to. And our security in transportation fuels, we need to look at all of our domestic resources, both renewable and alternative. On the one hand, we have biofuels, which are an exciting option using renewable feedstocks, and on the other hand, we have the option of turning coal into a liquid transportation fuel. And I think we all probably want to do this. Maybe our difference is in timing here. And I don't know, they're quarterbacks and they're coaches, and they set the timing and everything. I guess we all have to adhere to it. But we think the time is right to look at this amendment at this time. While biofuels have the potential to displace a portion of our current oil use, we simply don't have the supply to displace all of it. Coal to liquids also has the potential to displace oil use, but as we develop clean coal technologies for all sectors, we won't have an unlimited supply for this now abundant domestic resource. This amendment would conduct R&D into the blending of the 2 types of fuel in order that by combining them, we can increase and prolong our supply of domestic fuels. By combining biofuels with coal to liquid, we use less of our country's and less of the world's food supply and less of our coal reserves that can be used for electricity generation and other applications. With that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the time, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I think you're going to have better luck on your next amendment. But this is, to a great extent, a replay of Mr. McCall's earlier amendment. So rather than taking the committee's time, let me just once again say that I don't think this issue is quite right. We are going to aggressively study it this fall. Is there anyone else that would like to have a discussion? If there is no further discussion, then the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. No. The noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, we'd like a recorded vote.
The clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Gordon.
No.
Chairman Gordon votes no. Mr. Costello. Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson votes no. Ms. Woolsey. Ms. Woolsey votes no. Mr. Udall. Mr. Udall votes no. Mr. Wu. Mr. Baird. Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller votes no. Mr. Lipinski. Mr. Lipinski votes no. Mr. Lamson? Mr. Lamson votes no. Ms. Giffords? Ms. Giffords votes no. Mr. McNerney? Mr. McNerney votes no. Mr. Kenjorski? Ms. Hooley? Ms. Hooley votes no. Mr. Rothman? Mr. Rothman votes no. Mr. Honda? Mr. Honda votes no. Mr. Matheson? Mr. Matheson votes no. Mr. Ross? Mr. Ross votes no. Mr. Chandler? Mr. Chandler votes no. Mr. Carnahan? Mr. Carnahan votes no. Mr. Melanson? Mr. Melanson votes no. Mr. Hill? Mr. Hill? Mr. Mitchell? Mr. Mitchell votes no. Mr. Wilson? Mr. Hall?
Aye.
Mr. Hall votes aye. Mr. Sensenbrenner? Mr. Lamar Smith? Mr. Roybacher? Mr. Bartlett? Mr. Ehlers? Mr. Lucas? Mrs. Biggert? Mrs. Biggert votes aye. Mr. Aiken? Mr. Bonner? Mr. Feeney? Mr. Feeney votes aye. Mr. Nagelbauer? Mr. Nagelbauer votes aye. Mr. Inglis? Mr. Inglis votes aye. Mr. Reichert? Mr. Reichert votes no. Mr. McCall? Mr. McCall votes aye. Mr. Diaz-Bolart? Mr. Diaz-Bolart votes aye. Mr. Gingray? Mr. Gingray votes aye. Mr. Bilbray? Mr. Bilbray votes aye. Mr. Adrian Smith? Mr. Adrian Smith votes aye.
Are there other members whose vote was not recorded who would like to have their vote recorded? If no, then the clerk, Mr. Wu. I think. Thank you, Mr. Wu. Mr. Bartlett.
Mr. Bartlett votes aye.
If no one else is here, then the clerk will report. No, but since the clerk has not reported back, then if with unanimous consent, Mr. Robacher, I would ask that he be able to do something.
Vote several times if you will.
Mr. Roybacher votes aye.
Okay, we're going to have to close it now. So would the clerk please report?
Mr. Chairman, 12 members vote aye and 20 vote no.
To answer Mr. Hall's question, no. The third amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hall. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
I'm ready to proceed. I have amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment. It's
amendment to H.R. 2773 offered by Mr. Hall, amendment number 009.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Mr. Chairman, since I'm going to do better on this one, I thank you for agreeing to accept the amendment, so I'll be as brief as possible. My amendment adds biogas where appropriate in the bill to ensure its inclusion and recognition as a biofuel. Biogas is a renewable fuel that we often tend to overlook, but it provides substantial renewable benefits in that its production does not require additional land or water supply and can be transported by pipeline once it meets pipeline gas standards. Biogas can also be converted to liquefied form, providing critical fuel use for heavy and medium-duty trucks. Biogas, unlike other biofuels, can provide up to 200% greenhouse gas reductions, as the gas would otherwise be released into the atmosphere as waste. Hence, by producing biogas as a fuel, as a vehicle fuel, its release into the atmosphere is prevented and turned into a clean, low-carbon fuel that can be applied to some of the cleanest burning engines currently available on the market. As well, biogas clearly provides direct foreign oil displacement because its sources are domestic. And I want to thank the staff for working on this with us. Thank you and your staff and our staff for working together. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Is there further discussion on this good amendment? If no, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The fourth amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Matheson. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
I am, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 2773, offered by Mr. Matheson of Utah.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think most members of the committee are aware that biofuels, and particularly ethanol, have a different makeup than gasoline. And something that my office has heard a lot about, and probably a lot of other members have heard about, is the concern that in terms of how you dispense this material, it's a different type of material than gasoline. And so there have been other issues about how it's treated in pipelines. My amendment focuses more on the actual dispenser of the fuel at the service station. And the concern that the various folks in the industry have expressed is that there is not a standard out there for how you design the dispensing equipment to make this work right with this new product. And what I've said in my amendment is if the private sector does not come up with its own set of standards for this, and we're going to allow that to happen first, but they don't, then the legislation would direct NIST to undertake the task of developing an industry standard so that when we try to build out this infrastructure across our country, people are working to the same standard and it makes for a more efficient circumstance in the marketplace. That's the amendment in a simple explanation, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be happy to yield for any questions or yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Matheson. There's about $15 billion infrastructure out there that would have to be replicated if we don't get this right. And your amendment, really along with the bill that we passed earlier on E85 in terms of using NIST as that standard setter, is another very good addition. Is there anyone else? The gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I think I have a question more to council on this, if that's all right. And what does the word appropriate specifically mean in this amendment? At what point in the development of the private sector standard do the standards become appropriate under this amendment? That would be really the question. But, Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that the National Technology Transfer and Advancement Act requires that all federal agencies to use privately developed standards, particularly those developed by the standards developing agencies. I want to also know if that's correct, if the council can let me know if that's correct. Further, does this amendment direct the federal agency, the Department of Energy, to violate that requirement? Does it ask NIST to violate that requirement? And lastly, Mr. Chairman, if I can also ask council, does this amendment ask NIST to ignore the requirement to, again, coordinate federal, state, and local technical standards activities with private sector technical standards activities with the goal of eliminating the unnecessary duplication and complexity in the development and promulgation of the measures. So I would obviously then see if council can answer those questions for me, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gaspard, the appropriate standard language, the appropriate private sector standard language that's in this is actually mirrors the language that's in the National Technology Transfer Act. It's a term that's used in there as for appropriate standard. In the absence of an appropriate private sector standard, the National Technology Transfer Act allows for the federal agency then the appropriate federal agency to promulgate the standard if such standard doesn't exist.
And Mr. Chairman, also I'm going to have this question really is more for Mr. Matheson's amendment.
Sorry, would you like for Mr. Matheson to comment, or rather than the council? Is that what you're saying?
It's actually based on the language in Mr. Matheson's amendment that I'm asking this question. I want to just make sure that we're on the right place here.
Oh yes, correct.
Okay, right. Okay.
Okay, so I want to. I want to understand what I did not answer for you, Mr. Diaz-Flores.
No, I just want to make sure that I was in the right place, so
Okay.
you're
Yeah,
fine, you're fine. I
Okay.
just want to make sure that I was not,
Understood.
asking you the question in the wrong time. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, and we have the council's comments on record. And is there further discussion on the amendment? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is passed. I understand that Ms. Biggers has like many of us, has an additional markup, has to leave, and so I'm asked unanimous consent that her amendment, which is the last amendment in the series, be moved up to deal with now. And if there's no objection, then
Mr. Chairman, I don't object, but I'm at the same markup as she is.
you have an amendment.
Yeah.
Well, then what?
Well, go with Ms. Biggert, but I just want you to know we're at the same mark.
Okay, well then we'll do hers and then and move yours up if that's necessary also. The next amendment on the roster is the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Biggert. Are you ready to proceed?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 2773 offered by Mrs. Biggert of Illinois.
Ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment does three things. First, it amends Section 5 of the bill to limit to 5 years the duration of any grants for the creation of up to 5 biofuel research centers. After 5 years, if the DOE chooses not to terminate the grant, then my amendment still requires the grantee to reapply for another grant and may have to compete to receive additional funds. This amendment ensures that DOE holds these centers accountable for conducting research that produces results. To be effective, the kind of research centers established in Section 5 of this bill should concentrate resources on a specific problem for a finite period of time. If this kind of concentrated effort doesn't yield any breakthroughs, the DOE should focus its research efforts elsewhere. The amendment gives the DOE the flexibility to end its support for one center and take the research in a new and different direction. Plus, it prevents these centers from becoming another part of the entrenched DOE bureaucracy. Second, my amendment would require the DOE to evaluate the life cycle impact, and I think that it's too bad Mr. Bilbray is not here right now because he would like this, to evaluate the life cycle impact of the use of various ethanol blends on carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions as part of the ethanol blend studies in Section 8. If we are truly concerned about energy efficiency and climate change, then we need to think about increasing ethanol consumption within that context. We need to think about not just the efficiency of and emissions from our vehicles, but also the efficiency of and emissions from biorefineries and the production of ethanol feedstocks. This provision of the amendment will allow Congress, the DOE, and potential ethanol producers to take a big picture look at how expanding the use of ethanol will affect carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions. Finally, the amendment expands the study on biodiesel's impact on engine and engine durability in Section 10 of the bill to also include its impact on the performance of engines and engine systems. This amendment also extends from 1 year to 2 the time allowed for DOE to complete this study. We've got to develop a better understanding of biodiesel's impact on engines and engine systems if we are to perfect a biodiesel blend that maximizes both their durability and performance. That's why the study in Section 10 should focus more than durability. What good will biodiesel be to consumers if it's formulated to minimize any wear and tear on a diesel engine, but it leads to clogged fuel filters, higher emissions, or lower fuel economy? And the converse is just as true. What good will biodiesel be to consumers if it doesn't clog filters and lead to lower emissions and better fuel economy, but the engine only lasts a few years? Not much in either case, and that's why this amendment would require the DOE to take a broader look at biodiesel's impact on engines and engine systems. I urge my colleagues to support the amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Biggers, for this good amendment. Anyone else would like to make a comment? If not, all in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The amendment passes. First of all, let me thank the ones of you that are still here. I know there's lots going on today. We're going to try to move on through this. I think we're through the toughest part of it. Ms. Woolsey also has is going to the same markup as you, and so I don't want to make this too confusing, but we're going to move to
amendment number 010, which is Mr. Bartlett and Mr. Woolsey.
Mr. Woolsey.
Is there a further,
Mr. Woolsey.
pardon me. I know the difference. Is there further discussion on the, so let me ask, is there, are you ready to proceed with your amendment? I guess that would be Mr. Bartlett. Are you the lead or Ms. Woolsey?
Mr. Woolsey, yes.
Okay. All right, the clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 2773 offered by Mr. Bartlett and Ms. Woolsey.
I should now consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The general lady is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank Mr. Bartlett, the gentleman from Maryland, for introducing this amendment with me. He is a great leader of sensible energy policy, and his involvement adds credibility to this amendment, for sure. As I've said before, my dairy farmers are seeing their small profits wiped out by the rising cost of feed corn due to increased demand to make ethanol. That's why I rise today to offer this amendment with Mr. Bartlett that directs research and development for biofuels to take into consideration the effects on the food supply for both humans and animals. We're now at a crossroads. The American public is overwhelmingly concerned about the effects of global climate change, and they are looking to Congress to lead this effort. Our challenge is not only to bring forth new energy policy, but to do so in a way that solves more problems than it creates. That's why our amendment is important. We need new energy sources, and I think cellulosic biofuels will be part of that solution to get us there, but not at the expense of taking food out of our mouths or driving up the price of basic food products like milk and eggs, because the price of feed is being passed along to the consumer. Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to support the Bartlett-Woolsey amendment and ensure that development of biofuels is done in a sensible way. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? Mr. Bartlett is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have some prepared remarks that I'd ask unanimous consent to submit for the record.
I'm sure they're wonderful and without objection.
Thank you, sir.
If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The fifth amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Indiana. Mr. Hill, are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
I am, Mr. Chairman.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 2773 offered by Mr. Hill of Indiana.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's imperative for our country to get off our dependency upon foreign oil. Corn-based ethanol is market-ready and can currently be produced at market-competitive prices. This year, we are expected to hit 7 billion gallons of ethanol produced in this country, of which almost all is corn-based ethanol. Scientists estimate that we can produce 14 billion gallons of corn-based ethanol. Our economy usually uses approximately 200 billion gallons of fuel a year. Corn is vitally important to other sources of food, having effects on the price of milk, beef, pork, and a variety of other products. It is also possible to produce ethanol from a variety of feedstocks, such as corn stalks, switchgrass, wood chips, and other forms of biomass. While corn-based ethanol is market-proven, cellulosic ethanol has not yet reached a technological point where it is cost-competitive. However, scientists predict that we can get there, and I want to make sure that we have the technology to help in this transition. We must prepare for the future where ethanol can be produced from a variety of feedstocks. My amendment would propose a study to retrofit corn-based ethanol plants, allowing them to use a variety of biomass feedstocks. This study will help us prepare for the future and help our companies with technologies and strategies to best maximize their current assets. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. Mr. Chairman, departing from my prepared remarks, I would simply say that during the campaign last year, I made ethanol one of the cornerstones of energy independence. It's not the entire solution, but it's an important contributor to our getting off our dependency upon foreign oil. This amendment of mine is an amendment that will allow the study of cellulosic forms of ethanol production, which is sorely needed in this country. It's good for farmers, it's good for our environment, and it helps us get off our dependency upon foreign oil. And I urge my colleagues to support the amendment. Thank you.
Is there further discussion on this thoughtful amendment? If not, then the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The sixth amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Bartlett. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
I am. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 2773, offered by Mr. Bartlett of Maryland, amendment number 011.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection. So ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
The amendment I propose is a change to Section 4, which directs the Secretary of Energy to submit to Congress within 180 days a report on any research and development challenges inherent in increasing the proportion of diesel sold in the U.S. to 5% biodiesel. This amendment is very simply cuts that proportion in half to 2.5% so as not to present unrealistic expectations. It is important for the biofuels program enacted under this bill to be realistic and to take account of the food versus trade-off inherent with biodiesel. Constraints on the contributions of biodiesel were documented in a 2006 National Academy of Sciences study released on July 25, 2006. I want to share the most relevant excerpt from this report, and I quote, "Devoting all 2005 U.S. soybean production to biodiesel would have offset 6% of U.S. diesel demand. However, because of the fossil fuel energy required to produce biodiesel, this change would provide a net energy gain equivalent to just 2.9% of biofuel supply from U.S. diesel consumption. Reaching this maximal rate of biofuel supply from soybeans is unlikely because this crop is a major contributor to human food supplies through livestock feed and direct consumption." End quote. There are, of course, other potential sources of biodiesel, but it is hard to imagine that they could be much larger than all of our soybeans. Two of the co-authors of this National Academy of Sciences report, David Tillman and Jason Hill, wrote an op-ed published by the Washington Post on March 25 of this year. Ethanol hype. Corn can't solve our problem. They noted that if Americans kept their car engines tuned and maintained proper tire pressure, these changes would save more than the 2.4% net gasoline consumption if all 70 million acres of corn planted in the U.S. were devoted to ethanol production. Biofuels can make a small and important contribution to diversity in our liquid fuel supply, but we really need to avoid hype and giving Americans and our colleagues unrealistic expectations that biofuels can replace gasoline or diesel fuel in the foreseeable future without significant and at present unidentified technological breakthroughs. I urge my colleagues to approve this amendment.
We have an amendment at the desk, Mr. Chairman.
Amendment to H.R. 2773, offered by Mr. Lamson of Texas.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Oh, that I have the correct one here, Mr. Chairman.
This would be number 010, I believe. Is it?
I have in front of me 012.
Well, let's be sure we're all consistent then. Oh, okay, it's been...
Okay.
Oh,
Mr. Chairman.
Pardon me, yes, I see.
On this, I'll proceed with my comments. On this committee, we are very familiar with the important role that standards play in commerce. Establishing standards ensures that a product sold anywhere and by any firm meets the expectation of the customer.
making sure that a Coke is a Coke. Biofuels are no exception. When we need standards to ensure the quality and performance of these fuels if they are to enter the mainstream of commerce and transportation fuels. My amendment adds a new section to the study in Section 4 of the bill requiring the Director of the National Institute of Standards and Technology to make physical property data and information necessary to characterize biodiesel publicly available. The information will encourage the establishment of standards for these fuels, and I urge support for this amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't know if this is for the gentleman or for council, but what is publicly available? If you look at the amendment, there's a part that says publicly available, the physical property data and characterization of biodiesel. Specifically, what information would be provided as physical property data and also characterization? I'm concerned because can any of this stuff be considered proprietary or confidential business information? If not, why not? And obviously, we understand where the sponsor is going. We just need to make sure that we clearly are not opening up to making some proprietary information public that shouldn't be made public. So why is it not, and could any of it be proprietary?
Mr. Diaz-Balart, it would be physical property data. It's not going to get into the information of the operation of that business. It's going to be specific to this. And it's the same language provided within in other places in the law pertaining to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and all of that is defined within other legislation.
Yeah, if I can, Mr. Chairman, so it doesn't go into proprietary. It would not include proprietary data at all. Is that
It's not include proprietary. No.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that clarification. Is there further discussion on the amendment? If no, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The 9th amendment on the roster is offered by a gentleman from Nebraska. Mr. Smith, he was here earlier. There he is. Okay. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
I do have an amendment on the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 010. Amendment to H.R. 2773 offered by Mr. Smith of Nebraska and Mr. Lampson of Texas.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, this amendment would require the Secretary of Energy to submit to the Committee on Science and Technology a report on the progress of the research and development that is being conducted on the use of algae as a feedstock for the production of biofuels. The report shall also include any regulatory or other barriers found by the Secretary that hinder the economic development of this resource, as well as a recommendation on how to encourage and further its development as a viable transportation fuel. Biomass can be efficiently converted to biodiesel and used for many types of internal combustion engines, and algae production rates can be more than 5 times those of land plants. Furthermore, algae can be grown in many types of marine environments, including coastal lakes and ponds, and it is also possible to combine algae production with electric power generation and use the carbon dioxide waste to fuel algae production. Mr. Chairman, this nation is confronted with the reality that prices for motor fuel continue to rise due to the volatility of the price of foreign supplies of crude oil. Therefore, we must explore any and all viable forms of research and development in the area of marine renewable energy, whether it is for the production of electricity or motor fuels. This is consistent with our goal of energy independence. And I yield back.
Is there further discussion on this good amendment?
Mr. Chairman, may I just make a simple comment that I concur in the remarks that have been made and certainly support this and appreciate support for the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. And Mr. Ball is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have a personal anecdote relative to the amount of energy we're likely to get from these algal masses. I have a farm pond that's too well fertilized, and every year at this time it looks like you could walk on it. It has so much algae on it. This spring I put a pair of swans on the pond, and apparently they ate it all. There isn't any there. So that's just an indication of how much energy there might be in these. But it's clearly a potential source of energy, and we need to exploit all of them.
So we have, we say we have hyper swans now? Is that?
It's all gone. I don't know whether they ate it or not, but there's none there this year.
Well, if two swans can eat an acre of this stuff, it's my understanding that you can get several thousand gallons of oil off an acre of algae. So it's certainly worth certainly worth
It's a
doing
small
research.
pond, about a half an acre pond, right?
Does anyone else wish to be recognized? Again, I thank the gentleman for these are good, thoughtful amendments that are making us have a better bill here. So if not, then the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The 10th amendment, and what I think is the last amendment on this bill, is offered also by the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Smith. Are you ready to proceed?
Yes, I have an amendment on the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 014, amendment to H.R. 2773, offered by Mr. Smith of Nebraska.
Ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Coming from Nebraska, a state that is actually third in the nation in terms of ethanol, current ethanol production, and largely corn-based ethanol production, we've heard a variety of comments here today from both sides about the efficacy or efficiency of corn-based ethanol and energy policy in general. My concerns about the current language and the reason I'm offering this amendment to open it up to all states is so that we don't inadvertently, I believe, and I appreciate the objectives of the current wording. However, excuse me, the unintended consequences, I think, could actually produce results that we would regret, and that is basically an anti-competitive environment. We would more than likely be creating a false market by encouraging states that perhaps don't have the expertise already, and basically establishing an effective cap on the current expertise that is out there. Do we want to have states with corn-based ethanol only move forward with corn-based ethanol? We've heard about the challenges facing the livestock industry, and I think that we would serve ourselves very well to open up the research to all states, not just those with low production of ethanol, but put everything on the table. I think that when we look at energy policy and incentives, too many times we create too many obstacles, and we need to open that up, and that's why I would like to have a favorable vote on this amendment so that we can open it up to all states regardless of where they rank nationally in ethanol production. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there further discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, may I make a...
Mr. Lamson is recognized for 5 minutes.
Just like we shouldn't be dependent on a handful of countries for oil, we shouldn't depend on only a handful of states' ability to produce corn to supply the nation with fuel. The corn-based ethanol industry benefits from a wide range of subsidies, tariff protections, and loan guarantees, including a 51% tax credit for ethanol blended with gasoline. There are numerous ethanol research grant programs already, some of which will benefit from the increased authorization levels in this bill. The bill also includes a provision to provide grants in states that have low levels of ethanol production to spur the development of ethanol from cellulosic materials. And the funding level in the bill for these grants is only $25 million. This amendment would open up this new grant program intended for the states with low biofuels production to all states. Essentially, this amendment defeats the purpose of the provision with the existing programs that are already benefiting states that produce large amounts of biofuels. The provision in the bill attempts to bring these others along. I would oppose this amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Is there further discussion? Mr. Hart is recognized.
Yeah, I've been advised by my staff that this is a well-thought-out amendment and a good amendment. I urge you to support it. Yield back my time.
Is there further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'm back.
She's back.
Thank you. I rise in support of this amendment. I think that the purpose of this bill is really to increase the production of cellulosic biomass, and I think that we really should look at all states that have the potential to increase the production. If it limited to where there's low production, because there also can be no biomass. So I think we should put our emphasis where there is the potential for production. Or I can think of a couple states that we probably don't find very much of the feedstock that we could use. I won't mentioned the States, but maybe in the West in some places we don't see much grass. And I think this is something that we should try and find, not exclude those that really have the potential. Yield back.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? If not, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. No. It appears that the noes...
Mr. Chairman, I'd request a recorded vote.
The clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Gordon.
No.
Chairman Gordon votes no. Mr. Costello. Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson votes no. Ms. Woolsey. Ms. Woolsey votes no. Mr. Udall. Mr. Wu. Mr. Wu votes no. Mr. Baird. Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller votes no. Mr. Lipinski. Mr. Lipinski votes no. Mr. Lampson. Mr. Lampson votes no. Ms. Giffords. Ms. Giffords votes no. Mr. McNerney. Mr. McNerney votes no. Mr. Kanjorski. Ms. Hooley. Mr. Rothman. Mr. Rothman votes no. Mr. Honda. Mr. Honda votes no. Mr. Matheson. Mr. Matheson votes no. Mr. Ross. Mr. Ross votes no. Mr. Chandler. Mr. Chandler votes no. Mr. Carnahan. Mr. Carnahan votes no. Mr. Melanson. Mr. Melanson votes no. Mr. Heel. Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson votes no. Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall votes aye. Mr. Sensenbrenner. Mr. Lamar Smith. Mr. Roybacher. Mr. Bartlett. Mr. Bartlett votes aye. Mr. Ehlers. Mr. Ehlers votes aye. Mr. Lucas. Mr. Lucas votes aye. Mrs. Biggert. Mrs. Biggert votes aye. Mr. Aiken. Mr. Bonner. Mr. Feeney. Mr. Nagelbauer. Mr. Inglis. Mr. Inglis votes aye. Mr. Reichert. Mr. Reichert votes aye. Mr. McCall. Mr. McCall votes aye. Mr. Diaz-Bolart. Mr. Diaz-Bolart votes aye. Mr. Gingrey. Mr. Bilbray. Mr. Adrian Smith. Mr. Adrian Smith votes aye. Mr. Rohrbacher is not recorded. Mr. Rohrbacher votes aye.
Are there other members that have not cast a vote? If not, then the clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, 11 members vote aye, 17 vote no.
The amendment is not agreed to. Are there other amendments? If not, then the vote is on the bill. H.R. 2773 as amended. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. I recognize Mr. Hall to offer a motion. Does Mr. Hall, unless he prefers not to?
Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee favorably report H.R. 2773 as amended to the House with the recommendation that the bill do pass. Furthermore, I move the staff be instructed to prepare the legislative report and make necessary technical and conforming changes, and that the chairman take all necessary steps to bring the bill before the House for consideration. Yield back.
The question is on the motion to report the bill favorably. Those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Members will have 2 subsequent calendar days in which to submit supplemental, minority, or additional views on the measure, ending Monday, January the 2nd at 9 a.m. I move pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 22 of the Rules of the House of Representatives that the committee authorize the chairman to offer such motions as may be necessary in the House to adopt and pass H.R. 2773, the Biofuels Research and Development Enhancement Act, as amended. Without objection, so ordered. Let me thank everyone. We're 3 down, 1 to go, and again, I appreciate your attendance here, and we will move right along. We are now consider H.R. 2774, the Solar Energy Research and Advancement Act of 2007. I yield to the gentlelady from Arizona 5 minutes to describe the bill.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Chairman Gordon and Ranking Member Hall for considering H.R. 2774, the Solar Energy Research and Advancement Act, in the full committee this morning. I also want to thank my fantastic staff, the staff of the Science Committee, for all of your help in making this possible. Mr. Chairman, today is a bright day indeed, no pun intended. Last week we had the opportunity to hear from a very distinguished panel of witnesses, including the Director of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, the President of the Solar Energy Industries Association, SEIA, and the Solar Technology Coordinator for Arizona Public Service, which is the second fastest growing electric utility in the United States over the last 5 years. Many members of the Energy and Environment Subcommittee attended the hearing, and I think we had an incredibly interesting and informing dialogue on the discussion draft for this legislation. The bill before us today contains 3 major components, 2 of which will move research and development forward on concentrating solar power, CSP. The first would establish a thermal energy storage research and development program within the Department of Energy. This will help us, Mr. Chairman, solve perhaps the most significant problem with concentrating solar power, which is the energy storage issue. We need more advanced technology so that we can store solar energy when the sun rises and use it at night or on cloudy days. This is critical for energy reliability and viability. The second component, Mr. Chairman, would require the Department of Energy to conduct 2 concentrating solar power commercial application studies. The first of which would study methods to integrate concentrating solar power energy into regional electricity transmission systems. We need to research how to connect major solar power plants to the electric grid, relieve expensive demand on electric utilities, and use solar energy during these peak hours. We also need to figure out how to bring this abundant resource from the Southwest and other very warm, sunny areas to the entire country. The second report would require the Department of Energy to examine methods to reduce the amount of water consumed by concentrating solar power systems. Given the strain on water resources, the drought, for example, in the Southwest, we must study this subject so that we can fully realize the benefits and the possibilities of CSP technology. The bill's third component establishes a competitive grant program to create and to strengthen solar industry training and internship programs across the country. This will ensure that workers obtain the necessary skills to install, operate, and maintain solar energy products. The need for this program is clear. The solar industry is growing at a very fast clip, and we need to make sure that we have the skilled workforce in order to sustain this growth. A strong solar industry will stimulate business development, create new jobs, help protect the environment, and promote the energy independence, which we all understand to be so important. In addition to what I've introduced here, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to supporting several very good bipartisan amendments that will make this bill a much better bill. As I said last week, solar energy is a nonpartisan issue, and I know that we can all benefit from harnessing the power from the sun. I look forward to the members' support for H.R. 2774, and I will continue to work with all of you as we move to the floor, hopefully next week.
Thank you, Ms. Guilford, for this really very good bill. Mr. Hall is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, H.R. 2774 will provide research and development on yet another important renewable energy source, solar energy. I fully support research and development on solar power considered considering that less than 2% of our energy consumption comes from this renewable source, and it's a reliable source for most Americans. I'm happy to hear that the majority plans to accept a number of amendments that are going to be offered by the minority colleagues here today. I think these amendments are going to serve to make your bill a better bill, and I hope it does. I believe the amendments offered by Representative Bartlett promoting commercial application of solar lighting technology and solar air conditioning technology is going to do a lot to advance the use of solar power for everyday use. And Mr. Smith's amendment to establish a competitive grant program will encourage state governments and private industry to team up to demonstrate advanced technology, and I fully support these amendments. I support the amendment which will be offered by Representative English also, which would strike Section 5 of the bill. I'm concerned at that section of the bill because I don't think it makes sense for the Department of Energy to provide grants to buy equipment or pay private companies to train workers. I understand the need for training, but I don't think that's the best way to achieve that goal. And I thank the chairman for bringing up this legislation today, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Does anyone else wish to be recognized? Mr. Ehlers is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I think, first of all, I'd like to point out the greatest opportunity is in solar energy. There is no more stable overall source than solar energy. It doesn't vary much from day to day or year to year, disregarding the cloud effect. The supply is ample. There's an incredible amount of solar energy landing on the Earth every day. It's just almost incomprehensible. It's so much larger than our energy use, it's hard to believe. The difficulty, of course, is that in scientific or engineering terms, solar energy is low-quality energy. That means, first of all, it's very diffuse. It's spread over the entire Earth. It's not concentrated. Secondly, the thermodynamic efficiency of using it is very low because the temperature of solar energy as it hits the Earth is low compared to, for example, burning fossil fuels. So there are lots and lots of opportunities, but a great deal of research to be done yet. And I commend this bill because it deals with one aspect of the research. But frankly, I don't think that centralized collection facilities are likely to be the answer to the future. I think, for example, I'm hoping that within 10 years, solar shingles will be in the same price range as the current asphalt shingles. So then we can begin putting solar shingles on houses. That's an ideal use because that's a diffuse use. It's widespread, and the energy is right. It will be received right at the source where you need it. Again, it's not going to be high quality, but it may well supplant existing methods of heating hot water, may supplant heating and cooling in the house. Perhaps even electric stoves could be run off the system. Again, the problem is going to be storage of energy, just as this bill tries to address, but with the improved efficiency of batteries that are being developed for hybrid automobiles, considerably better than we've had before, the storage may become less of a problem. So I'm not saying this to in any way negate the bill before us, but I just want to point out this bill covers just one aspect of the issues that we face. One other comment in connection with Mr. English's amendment to do away with the education. Today, precisely at this time, the Energy and Workforce Committee, I'm sorry, it's Education and Labor now, the Education and Labor Committee is considering a bill to provide training for what are called green jobs in the bill. It's going to be comprehensive. It could easily include this. And it's a well-structured bill. It's sponsored by the minority, but we are working on it together. And it may well be that the training program in this bill that Mr. English seeks to strike could more appropriately be put in that bill. It looks at training for green jobs in every area of life and every area of operations, including energy. So I commend the committee and request that they look at that bill as perhaps a good place to put the training program that's in this bill, because it will be incorporated into all the job training programs that are already under the jurisdiction of the Education and Labor Committee and operated out of the Labor Department. That's just a suggestion, but I'm sure that the Education and Labor Committee would be pleased to incorporate that. But my main point is solar is the energy of the future. It's an inexhaustible supply. So far as we know, the sun is not likely to go out for roughly 1 billion years. And by then, I don't think we'll be worrying about energy supply problems. I think we'll have other things to worry about. So I just wanted to add those comments to the record, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Elders. And wouldn't it be great if we also had the equivalent of shingles that could go on automobiles, on the surface of automobiles for that type of also energy use?
If I may respond, the difficulty with transportation, that needs high amounts of energy for brief periods of time. And solar is low amounts of energy over long periods of time.
With storage also.
Pardon?
But if you can deal with the storage problem.
That's the issue.
Yeah, the lithium batteries.
Yeah, it's a good idea, but it needs work. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to make a comment? Mr. Rohrabacher.
Let me just note that I think we've reached a turning point where solar energy now does have an enormous potential, not just in the future, but for tomorrow, if we do what's right. Over the years, I've heard a lot of claims from people. In fact, I remember even back in college hearing claims, and when I was a young reporter 30 years ago, claims that were just not substantiated about what solar energy was potentially then. However, my reading of it and studying of the energy issues is that solar energy does offer us right now, because of the progress we've made, a tremendous asset if we just invest in it. So I'm very happy to support this list.
I agree, and Ms. Gilbert is getting us on that road. Does anyone else wish to make a comment? If not, I ask unanimous consent. The bill is considered as read and open to amendment at any point, and that the members proceed with amendments in the order of the roster. Without objection, so ordered. The first amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Maryland. Mr. Bartlett, are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
I am, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 amendments at the desk that are related in that they both use sunlight directly, real time. I ask unanimous consent to consider them en masse.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you very much.
The clerk will report the amendments.
Amendments to H.R. 2774 offered by Mr. Bartlett of Maryland, amendment number 006 and 047.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendments.
Thank you. I started studying energy 40 years ago. I built approximately 50 passive solar-powered homes and designed and built my own solar-powered home that is totally off the grid. We've been working at a furious pace in this committee to advance a series of bipartisan energy bills. I greatly appreciate the cooperation and collaboration of the gentlewoman from Arizona, Ms. Giffords, and Chairman Lamson and Chairman Gordon and their staffs. I want to especially thank Adam Rosenberg. They've all worked very hard and could not have been more receptive to my suggestions to make sure that this very good solar research bill became a better and more comprehensive bill. Mr. Chairman, I have prepared remarks on these two amendments. I would like unanimous consent to submit them for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, sir. In the interest of time, I think that the little description in the amendment roster describes what they do. With bright sunshine outside, we now have lights turned on in this room. There are technologies which could have directed sunlight here, and my first amendment directs a research program in this vein so that we can light as much of our buildings as possible with direct sunlight. The second one is a very interesting one. It uses solar energy for air conditioning. Most of the time you need air conditioning is when the sun is shining. There are some very interesting technologies out there. The ammonia cycle refrigeration is one of them, where we can actually cool with the sun, and my second amendment does that, and I thank you very much for the opportunity of working with you and submitting these amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Balder. I know this may sound weird to you, but I think this is fun to bring these new ideas, and I mean, I'm really enjoying making these bills better, and again, I thank everyone for bringing their unique thoughts to this and their past experiences. Does anyone else wish to discuss this amendment? If not, then the vote occurs on the amendment. All the amendments. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The amendments are agreed to. And now, we turn to Mr. Inglis. The third amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from South Carolina.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 2774 offered by Mr. Inglis of South Carolina.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
And I thank the chairman. You know, sometimes you move to amend a bill and you really don't feel too bad about it because the author is somebody that you wouldn't mind correcting. And that's not the case here. The author here is so pleasant to deal with. It's very hard to offer an amendment that takes one of the pieces out of the bill. But here goes. I am. I'll do it nicely, Gabrielle. Anyhow, my concern generally about grants is that what we do is we collect up tax money in the states, we bring it here to Washington, we set up grant readers and grant writers and regulations and regulators, and then we take the money back to the districts. And what started out as a bucket full of water ends up being a thimbleful when it gets back because the people got to eat if they're grant writers and readers and regulators. And so I'm generally disinclined toward grant programs to do that. I'm very disinclined if they're small because then what you end up with is eating a lot of the money in administration. And as already been said, this concept is being considered in education and labor. So my concern here is we're not doing rocket science. We really are doing very applied work here, which is good. Very important to do applied work. But the question is, should we use the scarce science dollars available to us to help community colleges figure out how to install solar systems? Or to set up curricula to help people to install solar systems. And that, I doubt, is the role of the federal government, and I doubt it's going to be very effective because, you know, if you're in a sunny state, you're happy to take advantage of this program. If you're in Washington State, let's say, you're a community college and you're getting this money. And so it sets up an equity question as well. So my suggestion is that we take this part of the bill out and stick with the things like Dr. Bartlett was just mentioning that are so exciting, where you really are doing rocket science. So maybe not exactly rocket science, but you're doing some science that is more basic research that the federal government has a clear role in. Whereas this, my community colleges would love to have this grant, but the question is whether that's the role of the federal government to set that up or whether it's the role of an enterprising community college in an area that has a felt need for this, and perhaps industries that will immediately latch on to and take it and run with it. I think that probably in sunny states that's the case. There'll be industries there that get with their community colleges and say, come on, we can do it, set up a curricula to teach these people how to do it, we're going to go out and put up these solar systems. And in those cases, it'll work without the thimbleful of money being brought, or a thimbleful of water being brought from Washington and dropped on the scene. They'll have a bucket full of money in the local community, and they'll get it done. And then the rest of us will learn from it, and some people will make some money out of it, and I like that. Profit is a very good thing. And the market will drive this, and it's a very applied kind of thing that we're talking about here. So my amendment simply strikes out that very applied kind of work. And but I congratulate the author of the bill on coming up with something that will do some other things that are aimed at the basic science, which is more the role of the federal government. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The mender is also a nice person and presented his amendment in a very courteous way. I think Ms. Woolsey wanted to be...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm so disappointed. I thought the gentleman from South Carolina was going to raise the amount of money in the legislation because he didn't think it was enough. But one of our goals as a nation when we talk about energy and energy conservation and green technologies is to know that that is the industry of the future. whatever direction we go in. That means jobs. That means we have to have the training for those jobs. We need training for installing. We need to learn how to work safely with these products. We know that we wouldn't ever take our car to a mechanic that we didn't think was trained and ready to take care of our automobile. So I just think that your idea that there's not enough money in there, Mr. Inglis is absolutely right. But we need to start somewhere, and it will prove itself out. I mean, the gentlelady's legislation is going to prove over time that we do need more money in there, and for just the purposes that she's trying to advance and to actually come up with the right kind of training for these folks. So there we are. That's where I am. Thank you,
Is
Mr.
there
Chairman.
further discussion on the amendment? The author of the bill, Ms. Gifford, is recognized.
Chairman, and I want to thank the gentleman from South Carolina as well, because I know we had a discussion, I think last week, about your concerns. What I heard from our hearing last week was that installing and maintaining solar equipment requires really specific, unique training that is not typically included in community college courses. I also saw a map that compares the United States to Germany, and whether it's South Carolina or even, for example, in the Hudson Valley, where Professor Cerruti, there is abundant sun across the entire United States. I understand your concern, but I don't necessarily think that is applicable. We know that the installers must learn how to work safely with these photovoltaic systems, to conduct site assessments, work with high voltage wiring, and perform these complicated installations on residential and commercial rooftops. The design of solar systems on either new homes or existing homes, as in the case of Mr. Udall, as he talked about having to cut down the trees, but in his solar system, is pretty complicated. Large-scale commercial solar systems require a high level of expertise at the design side of the business prior to installation, and the solar industry currently does not have the educational infrastructure to develop these skills. As the number of installations grow exponentially, not just in across the country, the need for a ready, qualified workforce is paramount to the success of the solar industry. Chairman, I used to run my family's tire and automotive business, and I would never believe that my mechanics could go work on an airplane, just as I don't believe that a general electrician can go in and install a solar system. The Department of Energy estimates that around 5,000 trained installers may be needed by 2015. And currently, to date, we have just 365 certified solar electric installers and 40 certified solar thermal installers. So we have a long ways to go in terms of the numbers that we need to meet. The solar industry is made up of many small and mid-sized companies which cannot afford to start these training programs from scratch or entirely on their own. They simply don't have the budgets to provide the necessary technical training. The workforce development section in my bill is pro-small business and also pro-innovation. It's going to help these small businesses with the workforce that they need to remain competitive in a tough business environment that's in a rapidly growing industry. But in addition, Mr. Inglis, I want to make sure that you understand that there's ample precedent for this kind of program. In Title 11 of the 2005 Energy Policy Act, and I have a copy here if you'd like to see it, it includes several energy-related workforce training programs that have had wide bipartisan support. The administration's successful high-growth job training initiative launched by President Bush in 2001 provided 38 partnerships nationwide between community colleges and workforce agencies and employers. Also, the President Jobs for the 21st Century Initiative announced at the 2004 State of the Union address included $250 million proposal to help America's community college train 100,000 additional workers for the industries that are creating most of the new jobs. These initiatives help community colleges produce graduates with the skills most in demand by local employers. If we want to expand the use of solar technology, we need to have these trained workers in solar installation that can help install and maintain the equipment. So I understand what you're saying, Mr. I respectfully disagree with you and hope that...
Mr. Inglis, did she change her mind?
Was she very persuasive? No, it sounds like a great business opportunity for somebody to make a lot of money installing these things. I'm all for them.
Okay. Is there further discussion? If not, the motion is on the amendment. All in favor, say aye. Well, I will, my hearing was a little off there, so I'm going to try that again. Is there further discussion on the amendment? I don't see any, so then all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, no. No. Appears that the nays have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. Chairman, could we have a roll call on that?
Certainly. The clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Gordon. Chairman Gordon votes no. Mr. Costello. Mr. Costello votes no. Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson votes no. Ms. Woolsey. Ms. Woolsey votes no. Mr. Udall. Mr. Wu. Mr. Baird. Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller votes no. Mr. Lipinski. Mr. Lipinski votes no. Mr. Lampson. Mr. Lampson votes no. Ms. Giffords. Ms. Giffords votes no. Mr. McNerney. Mr. McNerney votes no. Mr. Kinjorski. Ms. Hooley. Mr. Rothman. Mr. Rothman votes no. Mr. Honda. Mr. Honda votes no. Mr. Matheson. Mr. Ross. Mr. Ross votes no. Mr. Chandler. Mr. Chandler votes no. Mr. Carnahan. Mr. Carnahan votes no. Mr. Melanson. Mr. Hill. Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson votes no. Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall votes aye. Mr. Sensenbrenner. Mr. Lamar Smith. Mr. Roybacher. Mr. Roybacher votes aye. Mr. Bartlett. Mr. Bartlett votes aye. Mr. Ehlers. Mr. Ehlers votes aye. Mr. Lucas. Mrs. Biggert. Mr. Aiken. Mr. Bonner. Mr. Feeney. Mr. Nagelbauer. Mr. Inglis. Mr. Inglis votes aye. Mr. Reichert. Mr. McCall. Mr. Diaz-Bolart. Mr. Gingray. Mr. Bilbray. Mr. Adrian Smith. Mr. Adrian Smith votes aye.
Mr. Wu has joined us.
Mr. Wu is not recorded.
Ms. Hooley has joined us.
Ms. Hooley votes no.
Miss Biggert.
Mrs. Biggert is not recorded. Biggert votes aye.
Are there other members who have not been recorded? If not, the clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, 7 members vote aye, 17 members vote no.
The courteous amendment is not agreed to. The 4th, 5th, and 6th amendments on the roster are offered by the gentlelady from Texas, and we appreciate her combining these in the interest of time, and I ask unanimous consent that these amendments be considered in block without objection, so ordered. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment, Ms. Johnson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. These 3 amendments.
Let's see, and I believe there is an amendment at the desk, and the clerk will report those amendments.
Amendments to H.R. 2774 offered by Ms. Eddie Bernice Johnson of Texas, amendment number 068, 071, and 069.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for considering these 3 amendments, and they can be considered together. One amendment focuses on Section 5C of the Solar Research and Advancement Act. Texas is such a prime location for renewable energies such as solar and wind, and our citizens could benefit greatly from use of these alternative energy sources if companies could develop and deploy the technology to harness the energy. In order to be able to utilize solar energy on a large scale, companies must be able to capture and store it so that a reliable power can be delivered even on a cloudy day. One small amendment adds 2 words to Section 4A pertaining to a study on the method to integrate concentrating solar power in regional electricity transmission systems. This amendment clarifies the study and should analyze cost-effective approaches for management and large-scale integration of concentrating solar power. In devising this amendment, I wanted to make certain that the Secretary report on methods for large-scale deployment that are cost-effective so that companies can actually use them. In addition, such methods must be suitable for broad use in the electric energy system. This small change simply clarifies the aim of the study, and I hope the chairman will find it acceptable. The next amendment focuses on Section 5C of the Solar Research and Advancement Act. This section pertains to the newly established Solar Energy Curriculum Development and Certification Grants Program. The purpose of this competitive grant program is to ensure a supply of well-trained individuals to support the expansion of solar energy industry. And my amendment adds a sentence to the end of Section C, subsection C, that simply says, due consideration shall be given to women, underrepresented minorities, and persons with disabilities. It has been a primary goal of mine to be sure that these groups are considered fairly for grant programs developed in this committee, and this change is consistent with that goal. The third amendment also amends Section 5 at the end. It directs the Secretary to make public information grantee names, institutions, and a brief description of the project. The public pays for this research, Mr. Chairman, so I feel that transparency is in the public's best interest. And again, I thank the chairman, Mr. Udall, and Mr. Gordon, the chairmen, for their receptiveness to these changes, and I also thank Gifford for putting forth this bill. I urge my colleagues to support these 3 bill amendments, and I thank.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. As usual, you make another constructive improvements to this bill. You do this time and time again. Thank you for that. Is there anyone else that would like to discuss the amendments? If no, the vote occurs on the amendments. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments are agreed to. The 7th amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hall. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
I am, Mr. Chairman.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Yes.
Amendment to H.R. 2774 offered by Mr. Hall.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you, and my amendment would strike the section of the bill relating to research and development of thermal energy storage technologies and replace it with a more comprehensive approach to research and development on energy storage systems that would benefit all the renewables. As several of the witnesses expressed at hearing on this bill, energy storage systems for intermittent sources such as wind and solar are very similar. This would include thermal storage systems, but would not limit research and development on energy storage to this one area. This language is included in a larger energy bill that was introduced, that I introduced, and several minority members of this committee joined. It's my understanding, Mr. Chairman, that your staff is currently working on an all-inclusive renewable energy storage bill. And I'm of hopes, and I believe this language would probably fit well with those efforts of yours. But could have your assurance that every effort would be made to address a more comprehensive approach to energy storage systems and include the minority in the drafting, which I believe you will do. You've always been kind enough to do that legislation, and I would withdraw my amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I look very forward to working with you on this joint bill.
This is one I'm going to win. I withdraw my amendment.
We'll give you another.
Yield back my time.
Thank you. We'll give you a chance to win another one here. The Eighth Amendment on the roster is offered also by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hall. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment. I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes, and I understand that he is standing in for Mr. Smith's good bill.
Yes, this was Lamar Smith amendment, and this amendment establishes a competitive grant program to encourage state governments and private industries to team up to demonstrate advanced technology. All states are eligible to participate in and are required to contribute at least 10% of the funding. The federal government matches the grant at a maximum of 40%. The rest of the money comes from utilities or private industry. Since the grants are competitive, there's an incentive for states and utilities to pledge more than the minimum amount. And, Mr. Chairman, I just ask unanimous consent to put Mr. Lamar Smith's amendment summary into the record. And with that, this language was included in H.R. 5655 in the last Congress. It has broad bipartisan and industry support. I'd ask unanimous consent to put...
Without exception, yes.
The full statement of Mr. Smith in the record.
The full statement of Mr. Smith will be introduced in the record. I will say that we've worked with him extensively on this, and I think it's a very good amendment.
With this, I yield back my time.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? If no, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Now, the ninth and seemingly fifth or last amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Wu. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 2774, offered by Mr. Wu of Oregon.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, because I am having a vote at this moment in another committee in which I am serving, I would ask unanimous consent that my remarks be inserted in the record.
Without objection?
And I would just recommend this as a very good amendment and ask for everyone's support.
That's the best description I've heard today.
I yield back the balance of my time.
Does anyone else wish to make comments on this amendment? Mr. Hall.
Inasmuch as Mr. Wu has helped me on my voice voting several times, I want to urge you to pass his amendment. We agree to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Are there other amendments? If no, the vote is on the bill. H.R. 2774 as amended. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. I recognize Mr. Hall to offer a motion. Oh, excuse me. I recognize Ms. Guilford then to offer a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also Ranking Member Hall. And again, I just want to thank one more time Chris Garza, my staff, and the Science Committee staff for all of your help on this bill. Mr. Chairman, I move the committee favorably report H.R. 2774 as amendment to the House with the recommendation that the bill do pass. Furthermore, I move that staff be instructed to prepare the legislative report and make necessary technical and conforming changes, and that the chairman take all necessary steps to bring the bill before the House for consideration.
The question is on the motion to report the bill favorably. Those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Notice that there are no no's, so apparently we once again have a unanimous bill. The ayes have it, and the bill is favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The members will have 2 subsequent calendar days in which to submit supplemental, minority, or additional views on the measures, ending Monday, July the 2nd at 9 a.m. I move pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 2 of the Rules of the House of Representatives that the committee authorize the chairman to offer such motions as may be necessary in the House to adopt and pass H.R. 2774, the Solar Energy Research and Advancement Act of 2007 as amended. Without objection, so ordered. Congratulations, Ms. Guilford, on a very good bill. Thank all of you, the hardcore that are still here. We had a good day. 4 more bills, a dozen that will go into a good energy bill next month, and again, a bipartisan. Everybody go home and take credit. Thank you.